Ooh, tonight we're going to talk about the supernatural, the principalities.
I am the devil, and I am here to talk about Satan and the dangers of hell.
That's amazing.
Welcome to Mostly Focused.
Welcome.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to Mostly Focused. Tonight, we talk about the devil, demons, principalities, spirits of the air. We got Satan here. I called my dad earlier because
I thought that was supposed to be Zach.
Sorry, one and the same. I called my dad earlier. I was like, "Hey, I'm headed to your house now to pick up Satan." So he's like, "Oh." Anyway, joined by one of my beautiful co-hosts, Garrett, first name Hunt, last name, and just JP, first name Peyton, last name.
First name J, last name
okay.
P.
Yeah.
JP.
Bonus last name Peyton.
Yeah, JPP.
Oh yeah, JPP.
Yeah, you know me.
So tonight we will talk about just the unseen reality.
Yeah.
Demons. Why gays are possessed.
Okay.
I'm just going straight into it's a joke. Maybe we'll talk about it. But we're going to talk about our growing up, what it was like, how we discovered the demonic, what our relationship with it was, how that looks like, what it looks like in Christianity. Are there still demonic principalities and things like that, like exorcisms, possessions? How does that work in this culture today? Have we ever encountered any demonic entities or an oppression, or, when you were crazy out in meth, maybe a possession? Well, you did actually catch a possession.
Oh my God.
I do like that. That was a good two of them. Two. This man's got two possessions.
Well, not anymore.
No, you did. I said had.
Yeah, but they're diverted. My felonies have been.
So have my sins. Praise the Lord.
Praise the Lord.
Diverted. Look, I got I'm on one today. I was going to talk about, my dad's going to be grinning ear to ear. Talk about pop culture and demonic. Are horror movies a gateway drug to the demonic? Stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then lastly, where I was just alluding to, demonic stuff and like schizophrenia, homosexuality, transgenderism. Just mental illness as a whole. Do you like how I tied those all together as a mental illness? Beautiful.
Yes, that was really good.
Beautiful. And then just talking about how we should live our life as Christians in comparison. So that'll be tonight. There is no Zach outside of the devil here. Zach had a family matter. Thoughts and prayers. I was going to say hashtag God's plan, but that probably is not fitting for this exact moment. So Tanner actually probably would have actually come on tonight. He has a really good demonic story. That he could have shared.
Yeah.
But he could not be
Tanner.
Here. He's RIP Tanner. He's traveling, so he's not here with us tonight. So, Garrett.
Yes.
I'll start with you.
Okay.
You didn't grow up in church. We've established this regularly. So I want to start with just kind of a little icebreaker, ease you into the demonic pool.
Okay.
For lack of better words. When you were a kid, what was your first movie or just aha moment that there was more going on in the world than what you see, or something that just scared you and traumatized you and made you think the proverbial boogie monster is going to get you?
Well, the remake of Dawn of the Dead.
Oh yeah.
And so the poster said, when there's no more room in hell, the dead will walk the earth.
Yeah.
All right. And I'll never forget the opening scene to that movie where the couple are laying in bed and their little 9-year-old daughter standing in the doorway, and she's kind of in the shadows, and then she steps into the light in the room and she's a zombie, and her dad's like, "What the heck's wrong with you?" And she just sprints and runs and bites that dude's neck out. And I was probably 10 when that movie came out, and my mom took me to the theaters to see it.
Amen.
Yeah. Love you. And that movie, that scene traumatized me, man, to where I had nightmares about it. I never slept with my door open again after that movie. And it was always so in that it was tied to hell. Yeah. And I didn't grow up in church, but went to church.
So you had a baseline of what hell was.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a concept of heaven and a concept of hell and everything. But when I saw that, I was like, oh, there's maybe that's what hell is about, like evil people and stuff like that. And so it made me think about it a little bit. But yeah, it was scary.
So
and on the alarm clock, it said 6:36. I can remember every detail. And I woke up for school at 6:30, and I'll never forget this one time, dude. I woke up to get ready for school, and I'm walking down the hallway, and my mom comes out of her bedroom to give me a hug, and she's walking down the hallway like, come here, half asleep. Scared the crap out of me. I ran out the door and just went and got on the bus.
Amazing.
Yeah. Hashtag
you better want
God's
that hill.
plan.
You would have got a great, like the high school hill. You would have had a great workout every morning.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I'm also just now dawned on me that the devil's over here like,
See, he's even shocked.
They probably can't see it.
A camera can't see this?
Probably not. I don't know.
I bet the camera can see this.
Okay.
I was going to put him in my lap, but I thought that might just be ill-advised.
No.
Especially if he starts talking. Anyway.
Yeah. For me,
Yeah.
personally, it was The Grudge. Yeah.
7 days.
Yeah. The sheet.
Mhm.
Yeah. That.
Yeah.
That did it for me. It was
Your relationship with it, though, you had a very keen understanding of demonic and stuff like that.
Oh yeah.
And you've never been a horror movie person. Is that the reason why? I know we could touch on that in pop culture later.
No, but that was like the first. So you always were worried about, like, I didn't do Halloween or anything like that. But my first like real encounter of like something, like I encountered something outside of like what were they called? Not a Judgment House.
Oh yeah.
Stuff like that was not the same as actually. This is meant to scare you. So
Right. So I obviously did not get to grow up watching any sort of horror movie. Obviously, I mean, most parents aren't going to let your kids watch horror movies outside of Garrett's mom. Dawn of the Dead for days. Like my first real nightmare came from Dennis the Menace, Christopher Lloyd's character, the homeless dude. Dude terrified me. I had nightmares about him all the time.
Yeah, that's like, I was scared, but I wasn't worried about
the demonic.
Oh
Right.
yeah.
So that's like my only nightmare I remember having. But I remember I probably shared this on old, like when we did a Supernatural episode in like 2020.
Yeah.
A long time ago.
Probably right after Adrenochrome.
Probably, yeah.
Oh my God.
Gosh, JP.
Yeah.
No, I'm calling upon God to come
see,
save me.
amen.
Amen.
So I may have shared these stories before this medium, so I'm going to rehash one. When I was like 3 or 4 years old, I had this nightmare. All my nightmares I have, even to this day, are typically like I wake up in my home and then the nightmare happens. So it's kind of hard to tell if I'm dreaming or awake. You know what I'm talking about? Those kind. You ever had those?
Yeah, you're astral projecting.
Yeah, lucid dreaming more likely. Or sleep paralysis demon, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, I woke up and there was like in my old house in the parsonage, my bed was like against the wall, and then I had a wooden wicker closet door, and the light was always off, but the light was on, and I heard somebody calling my name, and it was not a good thing.
Yeah,
but I was a kid in real life and also a kid in the dream. It's like my first dream I remember having, and I walk over to the closet, and there was the only way I can describe it, and it's a kid innocent eyes, was like maybe the witch from Snow White. But I'd never seen Snow White.
Yeah.
But that's like the closest I can remember. Held it up in the corner. And I remember I started trying to call for my dad, and she did this on my lip, touched my lip, and I couldn't talk anymore. And then I woke up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember like talking to my dad about it, and I remember he prayed over the closet. And it's good stuff. But that was like my first thought about that. Felt even as a kid.
There's something else happening.
Yes, that's like a 3 or 4 or 5, whatever. I wasn't even in kindergarten yet, but I remember thinking like that had a deeper meaning as a kid. I was like, that's a weird dream to be having.
Yeah,
obviously my mind wasn't using these words, but like I remember thinking there's more from like at a very very young age. And looking back on it, that was probably obviously they're like the age of innocence that I don't think a demon could have attached itself to me or anything like that as a child, but I do think it was a version of like spiritual warfare, something like that. But just as a tidbit, the first movie that really like terrified me was Dead Silence. Bro, I hate mannequins. I don't like ventriloquist dolls. Beware the stare of Mary Shawl. She had no children, only dolls. And if you see her in your dreams, do not scream. She'll rip your tongue out at the seams.
I feel like I've seen that, but
the movies, I hate ventriloquist dolls, and they're like possessed, and no thanks. So anyway, first movie that really scared me.
You literally sit next to a puppet.
Puppets are different.
Okay.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, ventriloquists are like more lifelike than puppets. if this king came at me, I am talking into the mic.
Okay.
Oh, just saying. I was like, brother, I'm literally talking into the mic,
brother.
If this thing came at me, it's foam. I could win.
Oh, yeah.
But ventriloquist dolls are
felt.
tough.
Yeah.
These are wooden and whatever.
they're composite.
I've seen Magic with Anthony Hopkins. I'm not playing that game.
No joke.
Anyway, that with Dead Silence was really the first movie that I was like, ooh, I don't like that. But Paranormal Activity, the very first one, because everybody thought it was real.
Oh
Yeah.
my
I remember
gosh.
I called my dad and said, I just saw personified evil.
Oh, dude, every
Oh my
non-denominational church was like,
Yeah.
rebuke
So,
it.
that was kind of my introduction into that kind of stuff. But that's kind of putting it lightly because I was very sheltered, protected onto what I could and couldn't watch. And for some reason, like I remember going to friends' houses in like elementary school, middle school, they would watch The Grudge or The Ring or stuff like that. And it didn't bother me for some reason. But I guess it was because I was fighting demons in my sleep anyway.
Yeah.
So speaking of church, and JP, I'll start with you this time.
Okay.
Growing up, we talk about kind of the things that shaped us or like scared us as a kid and maybe realized there was more. But as a hear that?
No.
Oh, it's Abby watching something.
Cool.
Probably Love Island. I was like, I thought it was talking about demons. I thought there was a freaking little screecher behind me.
Could have been.
So in church growing
Siren.
up, what was your introduction to the demonic or spiritual warfare?
Yeah. So I grew up in a Pentecostal church,
Mhm. Same.
not
Yeah,
denominational, just straight up Pentecostal.
Oh, well. I
And
don't know if I did that.
so, it was very normal for someone to be praying. And then like, if someone's praying at say like at a level 5, like it like out of nowhere to just be cranked up all the way to 11.
Yeah.
And then, your only reaction is like praying in tongues. I remember very vividly, I was still very young, but there was a woman that was praying and she started to pray in tongues, but she had this weird, like the way she enunciated everything, it almost sounded German. And so
It was
my-
the
my
spirit of
intro-
Adolf Hitler.
well, yes. The atmosphere, like all that stuff was, I was very exposed to kind of like the spiritual warfare
Yeah.
aspect to it.
Were you alluding to the fact that the tongues were more demonic?
No, I was. It was.
Because I've seen people who do tongues that I 100% think was
Yeah.
more demonic. Now that's getting into deeper stuff. But
Yeah,
Is that what you were meaning?
No.
that's what I thought
okay.
he was meaning.
No, but whenever she would, it's almost like it's almost like in a more aggressive state. So it's almost like combative, like in a
Mhm.
spiritual sense. So like,
Got it. I
Yeah.
see what you're saying now.
so that was and that was very early on. And that's
Did your-
just been throughout my
Did your parents
upbringing.
talk about it at home? Was it like,
No. I mean, not like. I mean, I knew what was happening. I knew they were speaking in tongues, but I didn't have probably as much context as I probably needed as a little kid in elementary school.
well, did you like did the pastor preach about spiritual warfare? Did he talk about demons or Satan, how they're active in the world today? Like, when did that happen for you? Like, when was that realization that there actually is spiritual warfare?
I think whenever you go to a church that is more holiness minded, like we weren't like pants only, skirts only type of thing, but
Yeah.
there were a lot of people that practiced that around us. The constant mindset in a church body like that is you're constantly against the world.
Mhm.
And so you're always like whenever you walk out of these four walls, it's a battlefield. Like
Right.
that type of verbiage and that mindset is very much ingrained into you. And you just, because you have such a heightened sense of an awareness of how the Spirit works within you via the Holy Spirit and
Yeah.
all that, it's almost like it's a 2-for-1. Like just as much as the Spirit can work through you, the Holy Spirit can work through you, the devil can work through you. Like that
Yeah.
mindset. And so I guess I was always aware of it, but I never truly probably understood it.
Mhm.
And yeah, I think there come some flaws to that in the mindset, which we'll hit later, I'm sure. So
Yeah, I didn't grow up. Obviously, my dad didn't just teach about demons and stuff like that, but I feel like I always had like a very keen. I don't know where I picked it up from. I was reading these notes and I was trying to think about where did I become so hyper aware of like the demonic world around us. You know what I mean? Not like the world, but like literally like demons are active and stuff like that. And then like wasn't necessarily a fear. I was aware of it because I remember growing up. I was a church rat. Talked about this before, and I had like more fear on the church property I could go walk through a
Yeah.
graveyard and have no fear, but something about being on the church property, I don't know.
It's almost like you go into like the basement or something just because that you're so exposed to other like spiritual things happening. It's almost like there's little pockets, like little dark pockets in the church.
I'm dead serious.
Dude, when I turn the lights off on Wednesday nights and it's just me,
There's
pitch
something-
black, walking down the hallway, I'm like, I'm a little nervous.
Not facing
don't-
there. We sanctified.
No, it doesn't matter where it is. There's no people who don't do anything in church outside just going Sunday
Yeah.
mornings.
Mm-hmm.
Don't understand this. I've had this conversation before. There is nothing that puts more of a heart pit in my stomach than going into a church alone with the lights off or like at nighttime by yourself on a church. It's so and it's so weird.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, I heard about stuff like that. I don't know if I've just been keenly, and we'll talk before we go into the second part. I want to ask about what your thought of spiritual warfare as a whole is, but I don't know if I'm just have been keenly in tune in that when I'm in parts of my life, or if like I just have like I don't know if it's what you would call it, not a gift, but like I've seen more
Discernment.
manifest stuff in my
Yeah.
life, like personally stuff in my life. So going on the church property, I would always see, and it came through another guy, Scotty. I would see like black hooded figures, like not like with the lights on, just be looking out at me in the corner. Because the church, we've talked about this, isn't just it's a building. If you're not,
Well, that's all it is.
and I do agree with what you said. I think that sometimes, say like someone brought in a demonic spirit or
Mhm.
something in there, didn't get cast out, but it could leech on, just be there. I don't know how all that works fully. Never really thought about it,
Mhm.
but I do think that. I think it's a vulnerable place. Church is. People leave a lot there,
Mhm.
bring a lot there. And like, I just grew up seeing weird stuff like that, whether it was a vision or not. But then I had other people affirm like, bro, do you see that? I'm like, no. But then like the next day I'll be like, oh crap, I see it in the exact same place, whatever you want to call it. So I've just been hyper aware of the other realm of things. And in the next part, I've had like a true full on encounter, but like I've seen stuff like that.
Yeah.
And you can go through certain places, feel certain things that's just off in your spirit.
Mhm.
And then come to find out like, oh, hey, that person,
Yeah.
a demon cast out of him. You can just sense it. I've always been able to sense just off. I feel like it's pockets of demonic stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
And there's levels to it.
Yeah.
Like,
Mhm.
I mean, someone can have a bad attitude or,
Right.
like just,
and I'm sure people genuinely thought I had a demonic
Yeah.
spirit in me for a while. And I may have had an oppressive spirit. I don't know.
Yeah.
They're different between possession and oppressive. But then growing up Pentecostal, I mean, I saw people get, whether it was real or not, demons cast out of them. And
oh yeah,
people convulse at the altar. And
slithering like snake.
yeah, I mean, this was in 2013, 14. I saw a guy that he had a colostomy bag on. So, so when he's getting punched, noticeably, you notice it. This lady was banging her head on the altar thing. So he went up to pray for her, and she just started punching him in the balls, colostomy bag, all this stuff. He just kept on praying. And I was like, bro, he's got no nuts. Or God's supernaturally providing some padding for those balls. He's since gone on to be with the Lord. But so I've grown up seeing stuff like that. Do we have time for? Oh yeah, the next one. So I got a story that involves Tanner, and I'll share it with him.
Well, I want to talk because I didn't grow up in a church, and I know I made mention of the Dawn of the Dead thing, and there was times, my mom and I, we like messed with the Ouija board, and we'd done all that stuff and had encounters, and that was from like a very young age. And I remember my mom telling me a bunch of stories from her childhood. That movie was like the first thing that came to my mind. But as you were talking, my mom was one that really kind of introduced me into like the thought and the reality of another spiritual realm.
Yeah.
We weren't operating necessarily, or she wasn't operating in the Lord, but that's probably what had me start.
Yeah. And I think it's good to clarify early on, like it's one spiritual world. Like it's not it's not like a light or dark world. Like they're not separated by some big rift. They operate one and the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so
that's why it's called warfare.
Exactly.
They're on the same battlefield.
Yeah.
Now, granted, we all know who wins, so the battlefield is technically leveled already, but it's still until that happens. It's one shared field.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that the difference in a younger age and like our perception of like it feels like this dark corner type of mindset of these dark figures working, but everything is out in the open. Everything is exposed. You just have to be aware of it.
Yeah.
And so,
I have thoughts on all, like we talk about later, like how that operates now. Why we don't see stuff like that. Like in the Old Testament, the New Testament, there was a lot more evidences and stuff that's not in the Bible, but like are true verified. Like Catholics, they have like true verified like demonic stuff, and still today and overseas, there's all sorts of
movies are based off Catholic encounters.
Hey, shout out Russell Crowe.
Yeah.
But so have you ever, whether it's meth induced or whatever, well, first of all, let me ask you, what is your take on spiritual warfare as a youth pastor, as a pastor?
Well,
what is that? What is spiritual warfare to you? We're going to throw that word around. So what does that from a pastor's perspective mean to you?
Well, just like you said, that everything's a battlefield. And I think a lot of times as believers, when they read the Bible, they hear about the heavens but that's the spiritual realm. And for me personally, I knew the dark well before I came to know the light.
Yeah.
And for me as a youth pastor and just a husband and a father, knowing the darkness and the way it works, I'm always talking about spiritual warfare to the youth and making sure that I walk that line between, is it a mental illness or is it a demonic oppression? I know we'll talk about that later, but, being able, I feel like I have like a unique mindset.
Yeah.
Being able to see the darkness first and then come to know the true light and the power that comes from Christ. I mean, it's demonic and spiritual warfare is something that people don't even want to talk about. You mentioned the word demon. They're like, oh, there's no such thing, so that's where I'm at with that.
I'm very similar. I think spiritual warfare is something that's not talked about quite enough, but I don't think you have to use the demon word to talk about it. And I'll talk about this later. I think spiritual warfare now is more like, John said today, or he's talking about porn. And that's something we've all struggled with at some point, is like that time you're like, oh, I'm not going to look at porn. I'm not going to look at porn. Then you go to it. That to me is spiritual warfare. That's a demonic entity. You're sacrificing part of your soul to, you know what I mean? To give, I think it's more like that, but people don't want to classify, oh, that's just, I struggle with porn. No, that's a demonic, to me, that's an demonic oppression. Yes, but that's not the word I was looking for.
Influence and
whatever.
Cool.
Comer talks about it great in a book called God Has a Name. Read that book. I read it a long time ago now. I don't remember what he said, but it's great way to do it.
Well, he said that at least.
Yeah, well, it's basically talking about like a lot of the sins that you struggle with are actually strictly demonic influence, even if you're a hyper saved pastor. And every time you give into that, you are basically bowing down and worshiping that God. Yeah. And like you're sacrificing, like bringing a sacrifice to the demon of lust, whatever. And it's just like, you look at it that way. It's like,
and that's for me, that is my mentality to the reality of spiritual warfare is if I choose to do this one thing, I'm actually bowing the knee to the thing that's influenced me. Now, Christ has given me the ability to stand back up off that knee, but it's not like that. That's how I see it. So if I were to struggle with porn, every time I watch porn, I'm bowing my knee to porn, to the
idol,
influence
to the
behind it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it is true. Flick that bean or nose.
What is that?
I got it. Yeah, I got it.
Didn't mean to even say that. It just came out. All right, so let's talk about demonic encounters.
Yeah.
Now that we've kind of classified spiritual warfare. JP.
Yeah.
What is have you ever had any real life encounters with
my first like vivid encounter, because I've been in the room when things have happened, but not like a POV, like interacting. First time was I was in youth, like this ministry team, and we went to a retreat conference type thing. A bunch of churches got together, and our group was kind of involved in prayer. And I remember this one girl from one of the other churches had come down, and she was like your typical like goth girl. And so, and granted, this was in like mid 2000s, late 2000s. So there's more of a stigma than there is now. And so they just started praying. There was probably a group of probably 6 or 7 of us kind of praying with her.
Yeah.
And next thing we know, she hits the ground. And that happens, and you just kind of like your mindset is to kind of take a step, and then you're like, okay, we're gonna keep praying. Because she just fell out, like whatever, we're gonna agree. And so it's like once that happens, you start hearing this guttural kind of growl.
Yeah.
And so it's at that moment, thankfully the leaders that were with us recognized what was happening, and they, like any teenagers or whatever, we were told to just kind of take a step back.
Yeah.
And they told us, it was like, keep praying. Like, don't just watch, keep praying. So we just kept interceding. And one of the leaders from one of the other churches that was hosting had kind of gone into the whole, I hate to say it, but like the showmanship of it all.
Oh yeah.
Where they tried to address the demon, and
which is dumb.
That's not
extra biblical.
That's not. Yes, exactly. Like, you have authority. Why would you not just silence it? Like, it's just the type of thing. They kept praying and stuff, and it went on for a little while, and the girl had calmed down. But me personally, I feel like I've always had like a strong sense of discernment. And I never, like in that moment, I never felt a release or anything like that. And the night had shut down, and we were all getting ready to leave. And I, like, to this day, it gives me chills thinking about it to this day. I remember locking eyes with a girl as we leave, like she's leaving. And it was just like, already. I know, dude, it was just like the most serious, like dead-eyed look I've gotten in my life. And like, I feel like we left that night, and that girl was still like under some kind of possession, and
so you feel like you saw, not like saw the eyes of the demon, but you saw that she wasn't whole.
Yeah, there was no peace within that person. And yeah, I mean, that was like, I've never sought moments like that out since then. I wasn't seeking it out in that moment either, but it just, it was one of those things. Not that I've always tried to remind myself, like, you're not meant to fear those moments,
right?
And so I don't think it's a
I think it's an
act of fear,
natural, healthy response to have like a intimidation. I think you should. I don't think you should be eagerly wanting to seek it out. I think there should be like a healthy, like, you know what? I don't want to deal with that. Not necessarily a fear, but I'll be honest with you. I came across a bunch of people in the woods doing a seance. I'd be a little scared. I'd walk away from that and not feel comfortable. But, so that's an experience you saw firsthand. So to, reflecting on that now, well, first of all, have you ever had any personal encounters, like 1-on-1, 1v1, you and a demon, 360 no scopes on rust?
No, I mean, I'm sure.
Love it.
There's been moments just in prayer where I've felt, you feel certain, and we'll probably hit on it in a little bit, but certain spirits of, say, like we said, lust or anxiety, fear, like those different types of spirits kind of rise up, and you kind of go into an act of spiritual warfare, and you kind of you attack those
silence or give in.
Yeah.
So reflecting on the lady specifically, and I'm sure you've had other similar things like that you've seen growing up.
Yeah.
Now that you're 32, right?
Yeah.
How do you still? Obviously, I think you still do believe that encounter was real, genuine.
Yeah.
Do you still believe that demons are a literal, like the devil, demons, hell, all of the above are still a literal things that can affect the lives of others and manifest and all that sort?
Yeah. We'll have more opportunity to go in depth on it, but I think there is a difference though in how you said earlier, like, I don't categorize it the same. I don't put the same amount of weight behind them. Because again, I come into those encounters understanding my footing in it all.
Good.
And so yeah, I think there is a difference in it. The same way that God can empower me, the Satan can empower others. If you let him.
So I have a few stories. I'll keep them brief. The first one I really remember having outside of like the dream. I had other spiritual warfare dreams where I remember like it was like a.
Did your dad not come in one time?
Yeah, I'll get there.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I thought
that was more high
I
school.
thought that was the first one that you were
No.
saying. And it's like
The dream I told you about is my first real like I think spiritual warfare level-ish dream.
Yeah.
Had another one like that when I was in elementary school where it was the devil. It was on my bedside bed, but it was more like it was like blue, you know, like neon lights. It was like a blue neon Satan kind of thing. But he wasn't scary. But I don't remember what he was saying to me this day, but it was not good. But it wasn't terrifying. It was more like the angel of light kind of Satan kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then I remember something being off of my spirit, and I just remember like thinking Jesus, and then a light rushed through my room and it vanished, and I woke up and I felt at peace. But I really felt like it was like the devil or a demon speaking to me in my dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just had the wherewithal as a child to be like, I didn't know Jesus. And that was all I could do. You know, I wasn't going to go into spiritual warfare as a kid either. So there's dreams like that I remember having, and looking back on it, I don't think those were just dreams. I think that was a level of some sort of warring for my soul as a child. How, why, I don't understand. Don't try to understand. So me and Tanner used to hang out all the time in high school with this girl named Madison, one of our best friends. And her mom, Sherry, would like, we'd go to church there, or we'd go to church on Sunday nights, and then we'd go, or like on a Saturday night, we'd stay the night there. She'd make us tie-dye pancakes. We'd play Guitar Hero all night, you know, middle school and high school. It was awesome. But there was parts of their house that terrified me. Like there was one closet in Madison's room that I don't know how to describe it to you, man. It just made I'd walk by it and my stomach would flip. Like I'd feel sick at my stomach.
See, we said earlier, churches were dude. You couldn't pay me to go to other people's houses. I was that kid who was scared to go spend the night with other people because of reasons like that.
Dude,
well, I finally asked Sherry. I was like, "What? Did there anything happen weird?" Because I was in middle school, high school. I think it was like a freshman high school. Like, anything weird happened in this house? And she's like, "Oh, weird." But she said that closet, we lived here, and Madison would sit in front of that closet and just talk to it all the time. We didn't know for a long time. Then one day she sat and listened to her, and it was just like awful stuff she was talking about. And then she started talking to her, and they like telling her to do stuff, and like
straight up Babadook.
Yeah, like really though, like she wasn't like they're not those type of people to lie about that. Like they were pretty serious. And then Tate, her brother, started doing the same thing.
Yeah,
in another closet in the house, and he didn't know, but they didn't share that with him, so it wasn't like a
coincidence.
So I talked to my dad about it. Blah blah blah. Apparently, some people from the church went out there to pray over however you do all that. You know, I don't know you go rebuke a closet, but you know, there's something attached.
Yeah,
apparently, and I think that can happen.
Yeah.
And my dad didn't go, but he heard it from trusted people there that the equivalent of it, the way I remember it being heard is it told one of the deacons, "You don't know what you're dealing with." My equivalent to that as an adult is probably thinking maybe the demon did speak or something like that, but said, I don't recognize your authority or power. Yeah. Something like that. Like, who are you?
Disciples when Jesus sent them out.
To my head thinking that's probably more what it was.
Which we all know that's a bluff. That's a bluff.
Yeah.
Bluffed.
But I never heard if they resolved it, but I remember I got drunk one night and stood in that closet for like 5 minutes. I'm not joking. I felt like I was in there for forever.
Did you pee your pants?
No. And nothing crazy happened except for it felt like that room shrunk to like an Alice in Wonderland size. Like I was in a box, and I just felt like there was this giant presence right over my shoulders, just waiting for me to turn around. I didn't. I came out, and I remember Tanner sitting there goes, "I can't believe you did that." And I was like, never again. I don't know how to, there was something evil. I don't know how that happens or how something gets attached to a freaking closet, but there was something evil in that daggum closet. And and there's too much around it to know that. So that's another one. But personally, well, that is personally, but like more manifest. Me and Tanner had just gotten saved. We've been a few months into our salvation. We're really heavy in the church. Spent every day, every night after we go to work together, we'd spend at the church every single night for hours, just praying, reading the Bible, praying out loud, having friends come over, pray. That's how whatever ministries got birthed, you know. And we got back from a winter jam youth group thing, and we talked in the parking lot for hours. It was like 1 or 2 a.m. when we left. And I remember Tanner called me after we broke and he went home. I hadn't quite made it home yet. He goes, "Man, I just want to tell you, I was praying on my way home, and he said the only way I know to describe it was a ring wraith from like Lord of the Rings was standing in the middle of the road and I almost swerved my car and crashed. And he said I had this like sense of dread over me, and I looked behind me and it was in my rearview mirror, but you know, it was obviously. Yeah. And he said, I know it was a demon. I just want you to know, like, I feel like, I don't remember exactly how he worded it, but it's kind of like, you know, I think you could get hit too.
Yeah.
Tonight, or whatever. I was like, it's fine. So, you know, I go home. Y'all have heard me tell this story, but I've never said it on this, I don't think, YouTube form. I go up to bed, turned on TV, whatever, Sports Center, late night, scrolled on my phone, and I was obviously saved Christian. I lived upstairs in my parents' house. The whole top floor was just one of those huge bonus rooms kind of thing. Shut the TV off, scrolled on my phone a little bit longer, turned my phone off, set it down. Less than 30 seconds passed, and I just feel like a little, you know, something just like not crazy, just like a little brush across my head. I was like, oh, yeah, weird. Moved on, scroll my phone again, you know, put it back down. I wasn't scared at this point. The next thing I know, I feel like something grabbed my hair, like a hand, like not like pull it, but like a hand pressure on my head. Well, that got my attention. I looked over, nothing was there. I was like, heart sank. I was like, I'm not asleep. So that's weird. So I turn on Archer, of all things, TV show, comedy, comfort show. I was like, I'll watch a little bit of Archer. Okay, I feel good now. Instead of praying, no, I didn't pray because I was like hyper into that at that point. Just like, maybe I did doze off, even though I know I didn't. So turn off Archer, go back to bed, or, you know, maybe a minute's passed. And my heart, before I felt anything, I just knew something was wrong. And I felt something get into the shifting of my bed, like something got into the bed. I felt it dip behind me, and I just felt something breathing on my neck, and a smell filled the room. I was like, okay, I'm awake. Something's in my bed. I rolled over. I didn't see the bottom half of it, but you can see the top. It was this black, charred face, like Joker, not like the Joker, but like almost infinite cuts here. Gashed face with like jagged teeth, just these piss yellow eyes, like really dehydrated eyes, yellow, and just grinning at me like the Cheshire Cat. Didn't touch me, didn't do it, just staring at me. And it felt like I was getting lost into like an infinite dark void. Like it wasn't touching me, but the longer I looked at it, I felt like I was gonna get lost in it. I didn't rebuke it. I just like threw like I was gonna attack it, and my pillow went flying. Next thing I know, my dad's up in the room, and he had felt like obviously a demon manifested, you know. So my dad being that felt that. I explained it to him. We prayed, and I haven't had that again. But I mean, I was 20 years old, you know, 19, 20 years old.
Story.
Why? I have no clue. Obviously, I would like to think it was a deterrent, like, hey, you're following Christ, really good, I'm going to scare you. But that's not the way to do it to me. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel the devil's going to come at me. I don't feel like manifesting a demon's the way to do it, because instead of taking authority on it, I was like, I'm going to beat this sucker up, you know? I'm going to whoop it. I'm going to whoop it good. But, you know, looking in high school, like my dad, I would be asleep in my room and at the house, and I'd wake up and we used to have lanyards with keys on them that dangle. I had one on like a 3-pronged lamp, and I'd wake up and it would be spinning on there, like spinning with keys. So it's not like the air, I knew something was. It's so weird. Like that sounds like, you know, that's in like a Haunting in Connecticut movie, but like
a poltergeist.
Yeah, no, seriously, stuff like that's happened to me my whole life.
Yeah, for sure.
Until I got married, I haven't had any of that happen. I thought, I'd love to think it's Abby's covering. That girl's innocent, pure as possible. But ever since I got married, I haven't had any manifest stuff. But before I got married, even like engaged, my nightmares were so visceral and demonic. And it wasn't because of what I was watching or doing. That's just the way I don't know. I don't understand it. It's not spiritual warfare, I guess, but I don't know. I'm just extra keen to that part of the spiritual world. I don't know. It's not something I want.
Are you Danny Phantom?
I am wearing my Supernatural shirt, and Abby hates it because she thinks this is a pentagram. But in Supernatural, they tattoo this. It's a little different. It's got the extra circle, 2 circles around it. You tattoo it on your body, and you can't be possessed.
Well, yeah, that's the purpose of the pentagram. Was whenever they would summon a demon, they believed the demon couldn't enter in those who were standing within the pentagram.
Right. Plus, I have the angel Castiel right there.
Yeah,
and you have
Dean, but they found out
Sam.
That the demon could get within the pentagram. So
yeah. I wore this shirt for the Abby hates this shirt, but I love the show Supernatural. We'll talk about inviting things into our life in a minute. But, you know, I have a lot of stories like that. The last one I will share briefly. Sorry, I know I got a lot. Because Tanner's not here and Zach's not here, so I got to share one more story. We were at a youth conference in high school at our church called a Transfusion is actually what it was called. A bunch of different churches from around the tri-state area came. And one girl did like what you were doing, talking about JP, like convulsing. Yeah. Pastors knew what was going on. Thankfully, worship was going, so it wasn't like a huge crowd. But me and Tanner and our boy Luke, Luke Rudd, first and last.
Why you gotta say his name?
We were sitting in the front row. We were watching this thing unfold, and I remember her doing the guttural growling.
Yeah,
like, she didn't sound like a woman; it was a man's voice coming out of her. So I was like, "Oh, that's the real deal." So they're like 8 or 9 pastors talking to her. They weren't doing the like, "Tell me your name." They were like praying for her. I remember her doing like the whole horror movie thing. Her body went stiff as a board, like a bloated dog, and just goes. And I'm telling you, it wasn't like a smoke monster from Lost or anything. It wasn't that slow, but something like a shadow shot out of her, did a loop around the top of the church and vanished.
Wow.
I remember Luke going, he never comes to our church. He was like, oh. I was like, yeah. And to this day, like he'll bring that up like, oh, that demon getting cast out of that one was crazy. I'm like, yeah, that was nuts. So anyway, that's it. So do you have any stories?
Oh man, I got a plethora.
I didn't know you were going to have stories.
Yeah.
Tell me about Mexico first.
Why, did you see my note?
No, but I remember, I didn't actually. I'm not in your notes. Well, I remember you saying that when we talked about this, you had some Mexico stories. So I wanted to get those first.
So when I went to Mexico, I went to Tuxtla, and
Gary went down to Mexico. Was looking for a demon to slay.
Yeah, and so prior to this, Leslie, she was fasting all day for us. Our whole travel day, she fasted probably 36 hours.
Fast for me. That's the way to be. That's the way to fast. I've never thought about.
Leslie and I fasted for 48 hours before kids ramp.
You want to be aware of some demons who fast though.
I'm telling you. And as soon as I ate food after fasting, and no lie, it felt like things kind of mixed back together.
Yeah.
But it was like, anyways, I won't go into that. But so going down to Mexico, Leslie, she's fasting. She's like, hey, I was in prayer and God brought to my mind of all of y'all's hands, those who were in Mexico were covered in blood. And that you had blood on your mouth, but it was like the blood of Christ. Your words were going to be sanctified and covered by the blood of Christ. Your hands are going to be covered by the blood of Christ. And so, go down and we're having altar calls, for these youth, and there's probably 900 teenagers there. And I'm telling you, every single kid I laid hands on was like baptized in the Holy Spirit. And I've laid hands on hundreds of people in the United States.
Look at you.
Yeah, and there's
what's your body count?
Yeah. Yeah, but
I'll start calling you the Bonnie Blue of Christianity.
That's insane.
God.
But anyways, speaking of demons.
Yeah, no joke.
Amen.
You talk about lifeless eyes.
Bad. But so there's these 2 teenage girls, and I start praying, and prior to, the Lord gave me Colossians 2:15, which talks about Jesus' work on a cross, that he made a public spectacle of Satan on the cross. And I love that because he just got punked out. But that was the verse that was highlighted to me going down to Mexico. So that was what I was praying over this girl. And as soon as I started praying over her, and I'm praying in English, they're speaking Spanish. And I'm just praying that light will shine in the darkness, those kinds of things. And this girl, she starts shaking, convulsing real bad, almost doubling over, grabbing her stomach and just being like, like that. And so immediately I just recognized, and this was the kind of going back to what JP said, and what you guys said, it's like, why do you do the showmanship? Like, who are you, demon? Tell me how you got in here, all those kinds of things. I don't know. I've never been a part of a bunch of deliverance to understand,
I'm called Greg Locke.
Yeah. But, so as soon as I saw that, I recognized that this woman had a demon. I knew a lot of times they would be thrown up and or they would come out because they are spirit, they are breath. And so I just said, in Jesus' name, you have to leave this girl. And I'm telling you, as soon as I said that, man, she goes from doubled over, acting like she's going to puke, to raising her hands straight up in the air and just bawling, crying. And as soon as she started doing that, the girl in front of her started convulsing. And so I was like, okay. So I go to her and I say the same thing. Devil, Jesus has made a spectacle out of you. You got to leave. And as soon as I said that, she raised her hands. I'm getting like chills thinking about it, because like they just started praising. And I was sitting there thinking to myself, because, you know, we see in Hollywood, we see the movies and all that stuff. It's like there are these big grandiose demonic possessions. You know, there are ranks of demons, just as there's ranks of angels, but they all submit to the name of Jesus.
Yeah.
And I just remember thinking to myself, like, that's it. It's that easy, you know, it's that easy. But it was like going back to, I knew my authority walking into this place. I knew that this was going to be something that I could encounter. And so I was prayed up. Leslie's been fasting. And, you know, scripture says that this demon couldn't be cast out only through fasting and prayer. You know, who knows if those two demons were those types of demons. I just know
Could
that
it have been the same one that hopped?
I think it was.
It's old Legion to the swine.
Yeah, I think as soon as it got
Mexican
cast
swine?
out,
No,
That's
jeez.
but you know, that was my first encounter of casting a demon out of somebody, and it was just, it's incredible, because it's like, you know, you think of Acts chapter 19, the sons of Sceva, where they're like, well, we know Jesus and we know Paul, but who are you? That demon didn't turn around and say, well, who are you? You know,
you crapped your pants and said, Garrett, you don't know what you're dealing with.
Yeah, I'd have been a little.
Like, John, this one's for you.
John, yeah, for sure.
Go ahead and tap out.
But you know, that was an amazing experience to have. And the last thing, I mean, I had so many, dude. My mom and I grew up with encounter after encounter. There was one time we had a touch lamp in her upstairs bedroom, and we literally talked to a spirit who told us that it was like a 12-year-old girl through a touch lamp with 2 blinks, yes, you know, answering questions, stuff like that. There was a time where I turned her hot bath water on for her.
The girl?
No, for my mom.
Oh.
She got off work and she's like, hey, will you run the bath water for me?
Yeah.
And so I went and turned it on. I put my hand in there. It's hot. It's still hot. I leave. She goes to get in, ice cold. She was like, Garrett, you ran me a cold bath. I'm like, no, I didn't, you know? But the biggest one I had for me was, it was during the solar eclipse of 2017.
You were not quite salvation yet, or you were salvation?
Well, I would get, tomorrow is actually my salvation birthday. So I would get saved 2018.
Okay, I knew it was close.
June 17th, 2018. This happened around August 20-ish. 20-ish.
Yeah, I couldn't get my word out
2017 when we had that eclipse. And I was into tarot cards, astrology, Wicca, everything. I mean, I've seen it all. I know the spirit, there's a spirit realm. I mean, all this kind of stuff. Well, I go to my friend's house, go over there, and I always say this, you know, that I wasn't high. I wasn't so geeked out. I wasn't up for 2 weeks. I wasn't doing all these drugs and stuff. We were just going over there, and I was literally seeing my friends, their teeth were like knives, and they had these real evil smiles. It's just like that movie Smile, the demon, what they look like.
Oh, that's the knives. That's exactly how I would describe the jagged knives in his mouth.
Yes. Yeah. And so in scripture, the Bible actually says that their teeth are like knives who will devour the poor, you know? And so it's backed up in Psalms and stuff. So I see this happening. I see my friends' teeth are like knives. Their smiles are real big and wide, and their eyes are pointed down, like real angry. And I was there with another friend. And he was like, dude, why does everyone look so weird? I'm like, I know. And I have this all written down too. I journaled it and everything because it was insane. Multiple things. There was, I literally could see these physical, like 8 foot, 9 foot tall beings walking in the shadows. They would walk out of the shadows and you would see them, and they'd be like this green, like smooth skin, just real tall. They'd walk out and then they'd walk back in. And like I'm getting
I am too. Yeah.
I'm getting like
Is Shrek a demon then?
Well, talking about this kind of stuff, it makes me realize that like, I don't know if it's just, I don't know what it is about my life, but like everything you're saying, it's like, have I seen this?
But listen,
like it's
so this experience lasted 3 days. I would leave that house. I had a buddy walk in that night, the very first night, and was like, "Hey Garrett, do you need to leave? Is something going on?" I'm like, "Yes, get me out of here." And so he took me home. I came back the next day, still seeing things, and I'm not going to go all into it. But then the last day, and this is why I said I'm so thankful I got to see the darkness before I came to know the light. Because my mom and I, we've seen this, and I was outside, and it was like it wasn't just the absence of light, like a light turned off. It was a physical darkness during this eclipse, during this time of eclipse, big witchcraft event and everything. And I was looking at this darkness and I was like, that is something physical. And I'll never forget, I called my mom. We weren't on good terms. Me and my mom weren't. And I called her. I said, "Hey mom, I just need you to love me right now." I don't even know why I asked her to tell me that, or why I asked her to do that for me. But I'm telling you, as soon as she started telling me about how much she loves me, and I told her prior to that, I said, "I think there's some sort of demon here." And she was like, "Garrett, you can't take a demon on by yourself." She didn't tell me about Jesus. Oh my gosh. And about Jesus. Anyways. Okay. It's so crazy. I'll have to say that after this.
Chase your rabbit.
Yeah. So anyways, I told her, I was like, "Mom, I need you to love me." And she was like, "Garrett, I just want you to know that like when I dropped you off for kindergarten, when you got on that bus, and I just missed you, and my heart loved you so much." And, started telling me stories of how much she loved me. I physically saw as like how like those bombs in Star Wars from a Slave One, when they go off and it's like, boom, that shock wave that pushes everything out.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's what I saw as she was telling me how much she loved me. I saw the darkness like dissipating around me. And it's like I could see the sky again. And I was like, oh my God, and then during that same time, my friends, we've never talked about Jesus.
Yeah.
And so one of the friends that I was staying there with, his dad was a gypsy, and not like the rich bougie gypsies.
Oh yeah, like the old timey witchcraft gypsies.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were he was actually just getting back from this thing in Southern Illinois where him and a bunch of gypsies stayed, and it was like a big orgy party. Yeah. And it was like all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so he comes, I meet this guy, and I'm like, you could already tell something was off. And so they sat me down in the garage. They sat me down in the garage in a chair facing all my friends with this guy.
Wow.
Listen. And so it was just, at first, it was just the way we sat down. There was like a table, and I was on the other side of this table. It wasn't like, "Hey, sit in that chair, we're going to talk to you." But we go in there and I sit in this. I don't know how we all got into this position, but there were like 5 of them in front of me. And these are friends that I've known for years. And I sit in this chair, and this guy, he starts telling me, he's like, "Jesus has no more power." And I'm like, "What in the world is this guy talking to me about Jesus?" And then my other friends were like, "Yeah, there's a whole different way to life. You don't have to follow Jesus," and stuff like that. And in my mind, I'm like, why are these people talking to me about this? We've never talked about Jesus. And it feels on my shoulders as if there's these 2 hands pushing me down on this chair. And these are people, if I were to say their names, you would probably know some of their names. And they're telling me that Jesus has no more power, that there's another way of life, and other different things. And I'm like, this is insane, And so then when I get saved and I start getting into the word, and I see that love casts out fear, that I see that the light drives out the darkness, that I see these things of scripture John 1:5, a light shines in the darkness and the darkness could not comprehend or withstand it. I was like, oh my gosh, I get it. And then when I had my experience with the word and the vision that God gave me, when I opened the Bible for the first time, it was April 12th, 2018, 2 days out of jail. God gave me a vision opening the Bible to seek him. And I was like, oh, you're telling me it's Jesus. He's the one, and it was incredible stuff, man.
Bro, that's wild.
Yeah.
I have it all written. The Gypsy King basically sat you down in front of demons.
Hey, and I have a Snapchat message from a friend from that day saved. I can probably pull it up, but being like, you were right, because I was like, there's demons there, and I will not.
Makes me sick. I'm nauseous because there was one night at I just don't care. See,
you should care. You should care a little bit.
I'm still friends with these people.
I know, but
so I had a friend. She said, the things that are going through my brain right now, I don't even know. All I can put to words is that you were right. And I said, yeah.
We were at my friend's DJ's house, and they were gonna do. They're like, hey, it'd be fun to get. I was a freshman in college. This was like fall of 2010.
Yeah.
And I never messed with Ouija boards, and even as like a part, even though I wanted nothing to do with God.
Yeah.
I grew up enough to know that there's power to it. I was like, I'm not gonna play with that.
Yeah.
So when anybody did Ouijas or like got too weird in a conversation, I'd bounce or immediately change subject. Well, we were at CJ's one night, and about 8 or 9 of the guys were like, hey, and some of the girls were like, let's do a seance, like a real seance. So they Googled a seance, a specific one. Like,
I'd rather you kick me in the nut.
Yeah, bro. Well, me and Gibbs were like, nah, I'm okay. Like, dude, no, you're fine. You're a preacher's kid. I was like, all the more the same. I'm not doing. I know.
There's a divide between light and darkness. Let's summon it.
Yeah, let's summon the darkness. I was like 2 a.m. I was like, bro, no, I'm not doing that. So I remember we sat outside at the pool. And the funny thing was, it wasn't like one of those things like, oh, hey, let's talk crap about him. Me and Gibbs sat in silence. We're just like, I don't know why, but I remember them doing that. And it got so, I remember that I heard them laughing, ha ha ha, because we were just right outside the window. Then dead silence, like out of nowhere for like 10 minutes.
Ooh, and dead silence.
Yeah. And I remember going in there afterwards and opened the door. And I was like, y'all done? They were like, yeah. Everybody was so calm. And I remember me and Gibbs were like, we're going to go. Yeah. And we left. But they were all like, CJ, they're like super outgoing like me all the time. They were ha ha. Yeah, we're fine. Like,
yeah.
And I was like,
I don't like that. No.
I was like, and I remember when I walked through the threshold, like to go back to the house and out the door, I couldn't get out that door fast enough. And I didn't even care. Like, but I was like, something happened. I'm out. And they're all fine now, I think. But like, I don't know. But I was just like, no. Mm-hmm. I remember how I felt in that moment. Ugh, gross. So let's get biblical now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where does, we talked about how we've seen in our life that we do believe that demons, the demonic principalities, oppression, possession, is active in this world today in various forms. We have the, air quote extremes that we've experienced. Most people probably don't see or realize they see manifest things. But I mean, you talk about Smile now. It's funny because it's a pop culture thing. But
dude, I'm telling you,
if I saw somebody in the mall doing that, my first instinct, I might be like, I'm gonna punch that person in the face. If they keep staring at me like that. Yeah. Then pray for them. Like, you wipe that smile off your face. So let's bring the scripture into this. We've seen it. We believe in it. We know it's active to different levels, to different people. I think because I think of this stuff biblically and how it affects me, and maybe the reason I haven't had something like that, and because I would consider that kind of stuff borderline fear based. You know what I mean? I feel like that stuff isn't going to drive me closer to the devil. That's going to drive me closer to God if I see a demon manifest. You know what I mean? My first instinct comes back, I'm going to explore this a little further. The mindset like, oh, something's off. I got to go to God, talk to my dad. It's going to push me closer to God. So biblically, Old Testament, New Testament, whatever it is, Garrett, what are some examples, some precedents that we see of both, whether it be manifest demons or possessions? Like where does the Bible kind of point us to?
So with the Old Testament, I was just looking some stuff up, and because you will have mention of evil spirits, you will have mention of things like that in Old Testament, but it's really more about how the demons were influencing the people in the Old Testament to get them to sacrifice to the pagan gods, to get them Azazel.
Well, I was gonna say
Azazel,
because
he's the yellow-eyed demon in season 1 of Supernatural.
I was gonna say,
he's a god of the goat, the goat on the hill, or something like that.
Well, I'll say the little bit of studying I did, like the first instance you have is the snake in the tree,
right?
To Eve, and that thereafter leads into, the third of heaven, the third of the angels come in, and then basically,
which we don't know how many that is. I mean, I've seen some people do numerology, but it's a lot.
But there is the belief that, whenever you get into the fact that Israel was tasked with going into all the Hittites, all the ites, within the New Testament, that they were tasked of going in and conquering those people. It was an act of eradicating these demons, and basically the symbolism of these spirits seeing something within woman, because it's within their seed that Christ would come.
Yeah,
it's a targeted attack.
Yeah, every time.
And so it's I don't know. It starts there, and it's like as time. So you see an aggressive approach from God, because it's a de-evolution in a sense of like devaluing, degrading what God created, and so that's why you have acts like the flood, like all these different things, because it's trying to correct all this. And I
love how you said the word correct too, because all those things, I come to realize all the things that God did in the Old Testament that we looked at to be barbaric were actually like signs of grace and mercy, so that seed could continue to come out.
Yes. Yeah. And so but with that, like we said earlier, like when we were talking about lust, we're talking about greed, fear, like all these things are different idols within our lives that we, like fear can be an idol. Like we give ourselves to that. The more that we attach ourselves to that, the more it becomes part of us, the more we give ourselves away to that. I think the Old Testament, that is a good example of where that comes into play.
You brought up a lot of things that I was thinking. You talked about, you said one thing, you got me and JP going down a giant mile long road here.
Yeah. And I have a thought for the New Testament on why we see different specific things, but you keep going.
Well, I was saying Old Testament, you said you don't really, not you were saying this, but talking about it, you didn't actually see, you had all these gods, you had all these idols they worship. So there's a study that I had to do for school one time, that if you trace back a lot of the different idols and gods, specifically the gods they worshipped, they're really the same 20-ish gods over every different cultural centuries as times go on, including to this day. We call them different things. So these idols weren't actually idols; they were
beings,
demonic beings. So you talked about the hierarchy. These were probably, you have Lucifer, but there is, like, whether it be Azazel or
you see them as actual rulers in that day, the giants.
Exactly.
That's why you're saying earlier, Garrett, like you see green giants, like these figures and stuff, is because that those are the. It sounds so far fetched whenever we talk about it in this sense. Like we're not assigning so much.
Well, and it should though. That's exactly what I would want to do with the devil if I was the devil. I'd want it to sound far fetched. I want it to sound unbelievable.
No, who was that guy that said if I were the devil?
Nick Ripken.
No, it was like an old radio broadcast, and it was a really famous. I almost want to say Harvey.
Lee Harvey Oswald.
No, but he was like, if I were the devil, I would make everyone believe that I wasn't real.
Yeah,
So
that was just the point. Like, the same 20-ish idols, gods people worship today are still the same probably demonic spiritual principalities that are active today. They've just changed names, shape, and form.
Yeah.
And, Lucifer's.
Go ahead. Sorry. Well, Ecclesiastes says there's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same three things that happened in the garden, the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, and the pride of life. The same three tactics and the same things that Satan, who is just one created being, tasked out to hit the third of the angels that fell.
And I think it's important to say we've established we have power, but demons specifically, if one's targeting parts of your life, they have power.
Yeah.
They have sway. They have influence if you give it to them. And I think a lot of times people do without knowing it at first. Kind of like a Venus flytrap. You're in it slowly, then you got it harder to find your way out.
I like to look at spiritual warfare in this sense against demons and everything is Satan. He has a plan, a scheme, and a level of attack for you. And he scouts you like in college when I was a pitcher, we had scouting reports on hitters. And so I would know what to throw a certain hitter, stuff like that. And that hitter would have a scouting report on me, knowing the velocity of my fastball, knowing that I throw a curveball, a changeup, and a cutter. They would have those things. And so it was like, we need to know how the enemy works against us, just like the enemy needs to know how he can work against me. And it is that Venus flytrap type thing where it's like slowly just one little bit closer, and boom, you get God.
And I think most people know what do we want to call it? Oppression, demon, demonic they're willing to give. Like mine starts with pride. Always. That's my.
Well, yeah. What is the
that's
door?
Where it started.
What is the open door?
Well, pride. And then my, what I would call my most manifest one would be lust and deception. Those would be the ones I'm most prone to. And those are the ones that make me the most nauseated when you give into them. Cause it's like, you can name what your biggest, everybody's got their own temptation vice, that you just go back to. Those would be mine. And it's just like, golly, I watched this show called American Gods. I can't really recommend it, but the opening episode, very, very sexual, but it's like this black woman who's having sex with this man. And I promise there's a point to this. And, she's naked. You see her breast. And she keeps getting bigger, and the guy's getting like smaller. Like she's getting huge, like large, like Alice in Wonderland when she grows. Yeah. And the guy's getting smaller, and he's basically walking into her, hoo-hoo. And the door shuts, and he dies, and basically goes down to hell because she's, like the demonic
Jezebel.
Yeah, like the lust demon. And like it's just like that's how I feel every time I would give in to something like that. And then visualizing that kind of stuff helps a lot. Like, I'm sacrificing part of myself to this basically demonic principality. I think there's a lot of biblical backing to that kind of stuff, especially if you look at the Old Testament. The Old Testament has so many, people write it off, don't read it. There's so many amazing modern parallels and things you can apply to your life by looking at the Old Testament now than even a lot of stuff I get out of the New Testament if you look at it. But
yeah, no, that's good. And like the Old Testament is very visual. So you're going to see the way the Hebrews wrote. It was when you read about God, you see God and you visualize God, and then you visualize what they're sacrificing. You visualize the idols. You see it all happening. But to go talking about from like Old Testament to New Testament, I was thinking, we in the Old Testament, you see it's an influence on a mass, a large group of people. But thinking of the New Testament, where we see very specific instances of a demon in a personal matter to one person, I was thinking, I wonder if it's because Christ removed that veil of the spirit realm, of spiritual warfare. And, he tore the veil and everything in his resurrection, but he was also showing us that like these demons affect you on a personal level, and what starts individually in somebody will spread collectively to a people. And I'm not really sure about like modern day where people have all these names for demons. And I guess that if you are casting demons out, I know that Catholicism, you have a lot of names for demons, but I guess if you are having that conversation with a demon, I don't see why they couldn't tell you their name. We only see Jesus do that one time,
And
with Legion.
and it really wasn't a name. It was
It's
we
just,
are many.
Yeah, it's just
it's just the
we
you
are
call
Legion.
us Legion. You
Yeah.
know,
I think honestly that may be purposeful
yes.
biblically.
Yeah.
I think they
well, we would hyperfixate
exactly
on the name,
and people would
and not-
totally affix power to that
right? And
because it's a named demon. Because I think it's very specific in the Old Testament, right?
Yeah.
Where Michael got caught with the spirit in Persia.
Prince of Persia
Prince
to
of-
Daniel.
That was a demon,
Yeah.
for sure. Like some demonic,
Well, it had
if
to
not,
have
if
been.
not the devil himself.
Yeah.
But I would guess they probably named the devil at that point. But it was probably a high archangel demon because you got to imagine archangels got thrown down too. Lucifer was one.
Well, Lucifer was
Yeah,
the
so I
archangel.
can't imagine there weren't more, but they didn't name him probably for a reason
Mhm.
because
Because the point is, it's one single like you said, you cannot assign hierarchy to this. Like we cannot.
we know there is one,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's all that matters.
Exactly.
And do I have any problem? I've looked at them,
yeah,
and honestly, I don't like reading them.
one
I
sin.
don't like
I
reading.
don't read them
Listen,
either.
one sin does not outweigh one or the other. Like
Mhm.
one demon's power and authority over your life does not outweigh
Mhm.
the other.
Yeah.
So,
I agree.
Yeah.
And I think you should have. When we'll talk about that, I think you should avoid demonology.
Yeah.
Most people don't need it.
And
No.
maybe their names aren't mentioned because, like you said, we would hyperfixate on the name, but not fix the root issue
Mhm.
or the sin and the distraction it's causing us. I don't know. Who knows?
The most important. Tell me about the medium of Endor, though, because I need to know about this. Because somehow, in all my years of reading the Bible, I don't know about the medium of Endor.
I remember reading. I don't remember even where it's at, but I remember seeing. Like, oh, that's in Star Wars.
JP put this in the
But
notes, and now I need to know.
I can't. I'm not
just looking
versed
up
on
examples.
the medium of
yeah, you put
Endor.
this in there. You're like Old Testament examples.
Listen, I trusted.
Spirit sent by God, the medium of Endor. I immediately was like, medium of Endor.
Yeah.
Freaking Ewoks.
I
It was
wonder,
widget.
is it the one that Solomon or Saul comes
One of
into
those-
contact
one of those
with? Yeah,
wise
so
kings?
Saul seeks guidance through prayer, through dreams, and he goes to this medium. And the medium actually like prophesies to him.
About day. No.
Well, I'm
Has
trying.
David already been anointed king at this point?
It's 1 Samuel when
Oh, yeah.
so 1 Samuel 28. So David's anointed in 1 Samuel 16. And so, Saul is seeking, the Lord's not answering him. So he goes to a medium. But I don't know. I have to read the story
I
all
think
over.
another point about like Old Testament examples too is you can find answers in these
He
spirits.
talks to a dead person.
Yeah.
Saul talks to a dead person through this medium, trying to find out.
I think Bonnie
some
popped on
info.
burn the witch.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, I would say like you can find answers.
Yeah.
With these spirits. They have like there is answers to be found.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the way, the truth, and the light
Right.
Yeah.
of what we truly need or seek. But don't expect for no one to not just pick up on the other one on the line.
Yeah.
You know,
Because I mean,
Yeah.
if you go seeking something dark and you get an answer, you're going to go back to that well.
Mhm.
And they're not 9 times out of 10, like we said it or alluded to it, they're not going to come at you demonic and scary. And that's why they
No,
imitate. Some people, oh, it's a familiar, it's a friendly spirit. There's no such thing. There's no such
so
thing
stupid.
as friendly spirits. They're all
so
demonic.
ignorant. Maybe
That-
not. We won't
that
use the word
is-
stupid.
I know when we talk about mental illness, there are competing takes, and I
Mhm.
will listen to them. I will not. My hill to die on. There are no such thing as friendly spirits.
Mm.
No such thing. I think that's anti-biblical. I mean, I think people who commune with angels are anti-biblical. I don't.
Angel numbers are anti-biblical.
What?
Angel numbers.
I don't even know what that is. That's how I don't.
Well,
do
it's like
any of
your
that stuff.
777s. Like
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like people think that through numbers an angel.
assigning meaning to it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which there are meanings to numbers.
yeah, but
Yeah,
you
scripture.
get into numeral. I don't care.
Yeah.
That affects my life 0.
Yeah.
I don't see 666 and immediately go into a panic, you know?
Yeah.
So, now if my alarm clock all of a sudden went 666, I'd have a little bit of a panic.
It'd be
Well,
interesting.
I don't have an alarm clock
Yeah.
doubly. So if I woke up, there was an alarm clock at 666.
Plus, it wouldn't.
Someone was in my house.
It doesn't go above 59.
Yeah, so I'd
Yeah.
be doubly concerned. But no, I think that what was I saying about that? I got super fixated on that alarm
I
clock.
don't know, but we're on what? Part 3?
Part 4.
Oh, okay.
Oh, we are?
Well, we were finishing up the Old Testament, New Testament. I think we'd about talked about that. Man, I had a point I was trying to make about freaking, what were we talking about right before Numbers? Oh, yeah, my hill to die on. I just, oh my God, I asked the
mental
group.
illness.
No.
Okay.
Do you guys believe that there are friendly spirits? Like you could talk to your grandma who passed away.
No.
Oh, no.
So you think anybody
Well,
says like, hey, I had peace. My grandma spoke to me the other night, and
I would be very. I actually had a youth come and tell me that, and I had to tell her. I said, "Listen, that was not your grandma," and that can be really hard for them to hear, but that's the truth. You know, your
like
grandma.
You should have peace in the fact that that's not.
And Saul had to go to a necromancy witch, in order to commune with someone who was dead, quote unquote.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like,
well, in my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, Jesus never used someone who had died outside of, I think, of Moses when they had that like talk at the top of that. That's different. But like he sent a messenger though, like Gabriel, who never lived, to bring a message to people. He never sent like a dead person that was familiar to them to relay a message, right?
no, not that I am.
I can't think of any example in scripture where that happened.
Mhm.
I just have what better way to get somebody to want to look at extracurricular ways to commune with somebody beyond Jesus than to come to as a familiar spirit.
Yeah. Well, you
someone
don't
to bring
need
comfort.
Jesus if you can talk to the dead who.
Yeah, and to get comfort, to get peace, to get that. And then, that's just people, I've had Christians argue this with me. Like, no, there are for sure, God can use, and God can do anything. I'm not ever going to say that God, I just think it's anti-biblical going against him, Jesus going against himself to say that you can just communicate with,
I mean, Hebrews tells us too that angels are ministering spirits sent to those to inherit salvation. And so do I think an angel is going to like transform itself into my dead grandmother to let me know that she made it to heaven? No, I don't think so.
And for all you Christians out there, because I know you're out there too, angels aren't talking to you. That's schizophrenia. That's not your angels.
Well, I mean, people do encounter angels. In Hebrews 13:1-2 tells us
they commute.
Let brotherly love continue, for some have entertained angels without knowing it.
That is different. You're not communing with angels. I'm talking about like where you talk and pray to angels and stuff like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And like they talk back to you and that's like, oh, it's not a familiar spirit, it's an angel of the Lord. No, that is also a demon.
Yeah.
No, yeah. I think that's more of like, I saw a guy hitchhiking today. I think that's more of those examples. Like I pick him up. We talk about, like those kind of things.
I had one recently, but we'll talk about it off pod.
A hitchhiker?
No, an angel moment.
Well, yeah, but I think that's more of that like day-to-day things that you experience that aren't like a supernatural, like, oh, hey, I'm in my bed and this angel's talking to me. It's not like that. So, I made a TikTok about this one time about a girl who had an angel in her dreams bend her over and put the sword of the Lord over on her back.
Oh my God.
Serious. Like, no, I'm not trying to be funny.
No, I remember this.
And I was like, I had to very politely tell her, I'm like, honey, that ain't the Lord. That is
the Lord.
That's yeah, I know. I was just reading. Yeah. This is Fringe. This is Fringe copyright from the Count from Sesame Street.
Easily, yeah.
All right. Anyway, let's talk about portals, gateways, pop culture. The old adage goes, if you grew up in church at all, like, oh, you can't watch that horror movie. That's a gateway for the devil to get a foothold into your life. Or whether it be, well, you can't listen to that music. That's you. They're talking about crack. You're going to be doing crack. That old, you laugh at your parents because they're being, cotton-headed ninny mug and worry heads about everything. And, it's just like, is there truth to that? I always argue with my dad that he was just an old fogey. But now, especially having kids and stuff, you think about it, it's like, as kids are so innocent. If Violet sat down and watched Dead Silence, you know what that's going to do to her? Literally terrify her, scar her, like Donnie did for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's power in fear. And like kids don't know, and that's just pure innocence. So do I think it's a gateway now? Do I think it's a gateway for like possession and oppression? Not necessarily, no. Especially as a Christian, possession, no. But do I think it
is a seed?
It is a seed, a seed planted. And what you do, I use Hereditary as an example. I think it's one of the greatest horror films ever made. Most effective horror films, for sure. Every time I watch that movie, I've seen it a handful of times.
Mhm.
I'm like so mad that I watched it again. I have to pray every time during that movie. Because it plants a seed, a genuine seed, because it is so close to how, like, it just gives such a sense. Yes,
practically
it
how
gives such
these
a
things
sense
work.
of dread.
Yeah,
Every time I watch that, you should watch it just to. I want to hear
yourself.
Yes,
Don't you?
truly, you should watch that film.
We'll fast forward.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
But there's just something about like that film. It's like when I look at this, it's
Yeah.
like, are there portals? Portal's a strong word, but the seed is a great thing. Like Hereditary for sure plants a seed.
I mean, some people believe that mirror's a portal right there.
Yes, wild.
It's totally different sidetrack. I'm not going to go down that.
So I personally, I don't put as much weight behind that line of thinking as much.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly because of the damage in which it did for my own anxiety and fear.
Yeah, like just with horror film, like fear.
Just the pop culture side of it, the music, the movies, it just, I don't know. There is something to be said about how much weight, how much meaning we're putting on the here's the line, don't cross it type of thinking. I think there comes maturity, there comes spiritual maturity. That comes into check first. Like you said, like the perfect example of Violet, like that is pure innocence. And so you want to protect that.
Yeah.
Because again, more than anything, it's just a seed and you want to know the ground in which you're sowing into.
Yeah.
So
I look at it, fear may not be the one that's iconic for me, but like I think of, we talk about other different ways that demons can tempt or lead astray. For me, if I watch a movie, like let's just go to Game of Thrones, love that show, but there's some graphic nudity in there, hyper female sexualized nudity. You know what that does? That plants a temptation of lust in my head. And that is a portal, but like that's more than just a seed for someone who struggles with something like that.
Yeah.
You watch something, that's one of those things that I have had to come back and Dad was right. If you have a struggle and you watch something that consistently is putting that in front of you, that's just, that is a portal to struggle with.
But I think it's just kind of kooky to say portal because in
portal's a bad word.
In the 21st century, like because they're TV, whatever.
Yeah.
I think we're giving more context and more validity to something that doesn't really need it.
Yeah.
Like we just need to call a spade and just say this is sin or this is bad. You shouldn't do it, and not glitz and glam it too much. So.
Yeah. So I mean, so you watch sinful behavior on TV, something that you struggle with makes you want to go therefore and sin further.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So whatever you want to call it, I do now at my ripe old age of 33 do believe that there is more power than I ever thought there was into it. But I agree with JP in terms of like, I think how you word it, how you present it, because I think that's why I turned off to it so hard. Like growing up, it was such a, going to hell in a handbasket for this kind of stuff. And you can't watch this without giving part of your soul away.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's that extreme. But I do think that if you're not careful what you let in, because I've seen it play out in my life as a Christian, as an adult. Like, if I go down and listen to Ace Hood's, I might listen to I Got It by Gorilla Zoe, who's coming to Nashville, and I really want to go just watch that one part of the show.
Are you literally walking into a portal?
Yeah, no. I seriously almost text you like, hey, would you go to this just so we can go see I Got It and bounce?
Yeah.
To be able to just bounce this thing to that song and leave, I'd lose my mind.
It would be the greatest.
Clean too. That sounds like clean for us. Anyway.
Yeah.
But if I go down the rabbit hole and start listening to all my high school rap, next thing I know, I'm going to want to go hang out with my old friends. Not like go off the deep end, but like it does make me,
100%.
Unlocks a part of my old self. And like, I don't know. I'm just more aware of that now than I ever was. And kind of like, Dad was right.
I've found certain, like you had said, you made the comment of, if I do this, it's going to make me think of these people I associate. Like that line of thinking, I think is anti like redemption for what Christ has done in your life. I think there is like a discernment, like a discipline to it, and that could be true for you. But I mean, the illogical line of thinking of if I watch this demonic thing, it's going to attach itself to me, and then I'm going to do whenever that. I don't know. I'm not saying that could not happen, but
Well, see, like for me to expound on what you're saying, I know myself,
Yeah.
and I put myself in those situations as a Christian. If I go and hang out with those people,
Yeah.
whether it's just my mature, I've been way more mature in my faith than I have been in different parts, and I've been super mature on my faith. And if I get around the wrong people in that environment, I just cannot overcome that. That's why I have to avoid certain situations. I have to.
100%, man.
I just cannot. And that's not trying to, that's all me. It's a flesh thing. That's not a Jesus thing. Jesus obviously has given me.
Well, the flesh is weak.
Well, he has redeemed me. But if I cannot hang out with certain people in certain settings. And that's a me thing, not a them thing.
Yeah.
Because I know how it's going to go.
I got it.
And maybe I'm being, maybe I'm not giving myself enough credit, but I just.
No, that's also knowing yourself and your life experiences. And if we look at our lives, we can all be like, you know what? I know my line's here. And if I go over that line, I know what will happen. And, I like how you made mention of how music takes you back to a place, because there's times, for my conviction with my music is tied to a memory with me.
Absolutely.
And I can listen to some songs and it will take me back to that memory. Even if it was 10 years ago.
People call it a drug. It
really is, because it'll be like, oh man, that was crazy. It was a fun time. And then you have to remember and tell yourself like, no, actually that wasn't, I was having quote unquote fun, but I was a slave.
Fun and ignorant.
Yeah.
Like say you would get high on a certain song.
Yeah.
Like you hear that song.
So like
and
when
you remember that sensation.
Yeah.
And then like that pull, you don't remember all the repercussions of all those things, but you remember that feeling.
Yeah.
Me and Zach, we were talking about Good Kid, Mad City by Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Are we going to drag Zach right now? Are we going to drag him?
No.
Okay.
But Zach
speed
has different convictions with his music than I do. And I remember we talked about that, and I got in my car and I turned it on, because I was like, I haven't heard that album in forever. And I know better because of my convictions and everything. I turned it on and I was listening to it, and it just literally teleported me, and I was listening to it and I was like, nothing in that glorifies the Lord anymore in my life, and so I just
you can't separate it.
I can't separate it anymore.
God can separate you from the sin that took place in that time, but our memories, like our experience or whatever, like
I've literally prayed for the Lord to wipe my memory before. Like, hey, just take away. I don't want to remember. Just help me be free of this completely.
And that might be true, but that's not normally the case.
No, it hasn't been.
Again, that's why, it's important to
funny.
know.
And your memory, like my brain is flesh. My soul is not flesh, and my soul is being redeemed and will be redeemed. But my flesh has that memory still tied to it with the neurons and how everything works together. And so it's like my flesh wants to flesh whenever I hear that.
Is there anything culturally? Because I feel like we're stepping into more of the mental side of this.
Yeah.
I probably went off.
It's fine. One last tidbit on the song. I was literally, I listened to I Got It, came on my shuffle the other day. I was like, I'm going to go listen to that album. And Hell of a Life came on, which I used to love the song. I'm living one hell of a life. And I was rapping to it and I was like, hell of a life. And I went like full, this is something I felt like my dad, I got to turn this. I'm literally singing, I'm living one hell of a life. I want to live one heaven of a life. And I was
that's
like,
right. Heaven, yeah.
Heaven,
Your Pastor John said that sometimes.
Yeah. So I was like, I'm not singing that. Then I was like, let's go see him in Nashville.
Let's go see. What's Garrett doing this day?
I got to buy Garrett a vinyl for that album as a replacement because I stole it apparently.
That'd be cool. I'd put it on my wall.
Never listen to it. Put a lock that Leslie has. You can never open it. Like break in case of emergencies at my funeral. Just play I Got It, and that's it.
Yeah.
So last thing on that, is curiosity a danger? Since we're talking about from a salvation standpoint specifically, because we're all saved, more easier to relate. Now you have youth, that's a little different, but just from us, is curiosity a dangerous thing? Like, how do you go about, like, as a Christian now? Like, I still have, Go Hard by Kanye and DJ Khaled. Those songs are still on I don't take them off my playlist. I still watch horror films. I'll still watch like the new Bring Her Back film or whatever. Like when it comes to JP's like, not me. Now, I still watch stuff like that. Is that a dangerous thing for people? But I also know my boundaries. Like I know what I can't do, where I can't go, who I can't be around, situations I have to avoid. Am I perfect and all that? Of course not. Everybody still struggles and has their issues, but like, where does curiosity proverbially kill the cat?
I think so. Here's the thing. We're supposed to go out to all the world and minister. I'm not saying we seek out. It's not like you go
seek out your vice.
You go, yes, but we can't have fear to these things because God has called us to those people in darkness.
I think that's where accountability and brotherhood makes a big difference.
Yes. Too. Yeah.
Like if God called me to go to a Pornhub convention,
no,
you know what I'm doing? I'm not going by myself.
Listen, brother, God's not calling you to a Pornhub.
You're going to invite me?
Yeah, let's go. I'll say like Craig Gross, like him and his wife, Triple X Church. Yeah. I don't know if they're still on that path. I'm assuming they are. But
Triple X Church?
Oh yeah. It's a whole.
It used to be a really good thing. Like they came up with Kevin and I's like they felt called to minister to prostitutes, porn stars, the porn community.
Because they lived in that life.
Yes. So that was their calling. Their mission field was pornography. And they had their church called Triple X Church. And it was really for that group of people who had come out of that lifestyle. Like I said, I'm not condoning them because that's been a long time and bad Christian times. I actually have Craig Gross's book from back in the day. Really good stuff. But anyway, like if I was like, but if that was my calling, like there's no way I could do that by myself. Absolutely not. That's stupid, foolish. But, but yeah, I see what you're saying. So my favorite part of this episode and the most controversial part, I'm sure, comes to the question is, you look in the Bible, you talk to people, or like you look overseas, just over like, or in Mexico, or they're like true manifest demonic crazy stuff you see out of horror movies being recorded. And obviously the most important thing to note is Jesus having authority and taking, casting these out and having power over, because we know that's true.
Right.
But this is happening all over the world. Doesn't seem to be happening as much in the United States where we live. So my question is, from the Old Testament, New Testament, Catholics have never stopped. They record this stuff vividly on camera and like transcripts. I believe it. Do I think they go about it the right way? Neither here nor there. But why don't we see it here in the United States? That's my first question as we lead into this mental illness and stuff like that.
Well, from just my experience of going to Mexico one time, so it's not like I'm an expert on this. Going down there, you don't put your toilet paper in the toilet. Okay. And now I say that because
you don't?
No, you put it in the trash can next to you.
You wipe your poopy butt. I'm being dead serious. Put it in the trash can?
Yeah, because they're what's it, the pipes or whatever it's called is not like we have here. And so, what we take for granted here, they don't take for granted there. Another thing is they have to, in this area that I went to in Mexico, it's like they're really like witchcraft based. They're very religious in certain areas, certain things and stuff like that. And so seeing down there, everyone had a hunger for God. Like it is God or nothing. They have checkpoints you had to drive through for the cartel coming into cities. Like this is a real threat for them daily. Jesus is their all in all. But here, and this is nothing bad against an American, we just grow up completely different. We don't grow up oppressed to a point where, or we don't grow up so underprivileged where we have to have a water truck come in and pour water into a big thing so this restaurant can have water for all of these youth to shower and stuff like that. We don't go and use restrooms in the hole in the ground like I saw up there, but you see people truly seeking God as if it is either him or nothing. And here, I mean, every church that I've been to, you have those people who see God.
Lies a problem. Every church.
Well,
that's also a huge problem of the Western church. There's a church every half mile.
And you have churches that aren't exercising their authority, their gifts. They're biblically illiterate. you do have demons walk in all the time, and they get in the pulpit and they start saying all kinds of crazy stuff. Like
Greg Locke.
you have people who have so much knowledge of God, but have no idea their authority in Christ.
Yeah.
I like what I mentioned earlier about how these demons interacted with the people of the Old Testament. Like they lived with them. They had relationship with them. And so how these people were affected, it became a part of them. They reproduced out of that sin. And so you had these whole subsects of people.
Yeah.
You apply that to culture now. You look at Japan, China, or Chinese, like all Eastern cultures, like you have all these different shrines but if you look at most of your like horror stuff, a lot of it stems from those cultures.
Yep.
You go to Mexico, like there are different reactions to things spiritually. Like whenever you get into a church setting, like they react differently because of how people engage with those demons, those idols in those lands. There's different authority given to it.
Yep.
When you look into America, it is, I mean, it's like Greece, like the New Testament more than say like the Old Testament, where like Sodom and Gomorrah, for example, like that type of like that pedestal that we put those things on. We live more evenly in American culture. Like it's so ingrained into our culture, into our churches. So anyways, that's my 2 cents on it.
I think so. Going back to the question, to circle back, because we've kind of danced around it, all three of us just now. Why don't we see anything manifest today? As a whole? As a whole, like we don't have like 5 o'clock news, you know? Hey, well, not that you would, but like you just don't hear any friends, church groups, whatever, talking about, hey, we had a deliverance today, or hey, or
because it's not so likely that it's going to be labeled as, oh, we had a deliverance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So where do you draw the line? Like in the Bible, you didn't have people talk about, and to my knowledge, you didn't have people talk about mental illness. Is there anywhere that y'all can think of?
I'm trying to think if there was a couple demons that was
like the guy with chains. Like you could argue that he was. You would consider him mental ill.
Yeah, they definitely would have said mental illness because
the boy
he
who threw himself into the fire.
They said he's
sound mind.
Yeah, it was like schizophrenia.
Yeah, and then the boy in the fire. And there was a deaf and
isn't it the bipolar
deaf
one
and
too?
dumb spirit? And
I don't know if Garrett heard you.
What?
Nothing.
Okay.
he said it in there. Bipolar demon in there too.
Oh yeah, probably. At least one.
At least one. So the what I'm dancing around here is mental illness today. It's literally statistically never been higher at any other point than diagnosed history.
Yeah.
Like since you've been tracking this stuff, there's more mental illness in the United States of America than any other time in history. You said it earlier, where deception, lust, pride, my things. You said things like anxiety, fear, whatever those are, things like that. When I'm not saying deep possession, but would you consider those kind of things? So, let's start with oppression. Would you consider things demonic oppression?
So I'm gonna be honest, I get this stuff twisted and flipped all the time. Yes. Oppression, possession. Us as believers, we cannot be possessed. Zach wanted us to hit that.
Yes, he did.
But we can be oppressed by different
heavily
spirits.
Oppressed too.
So I'm going to use myself as an example. Recently, like I go to therapy. I find it very useful. I find it at this point in my life essential to my walk.
Yeah.
I'm just to a point where I need someone to walk alongside me and kind of give guidance.
Isn't that what Jesus is for?
It is.
I'm just kidding.
Hand in hand.
Yeah.
Jesus, I'm all right. Jenny's
the best.
But I will say, you do need Christ in the midst of that, because you will talk about certain things. And like, so I've been talking a lot about some stuff in my past, and different fears and anxieties, like different things that I'm walking through now that I point back to my past of like this was a cause.
Yeah.
And so the past 2 weeks I've been dealing with this anxiety, this stress that I can't put a finger on, but I've noticed it. I've noticed my body carry it.
AKA your boldness.
AKA, yeah, I got freaking, yeah. And so I, in my gut, like all these different things that your body doesn't, you just react. I don't think a demon is possessing me in that moment. The demon of fear and anxiety isn't like taking a grip and making, me breathe heavy, like whatever. But
I think possession would be constant 100% all the time.
Yeah.
Dwelling, intensity. You give yourself over to it. Like I said, I don't think you can be possessed. Because I think at some point, Christians, if you truly come to know Jesus, this is a side tangent, just not in here. You truly come to know Jesus, regardless of how far you backslide, there's going to become a point that oppression comes to the point like, I'm going to turn to Jesus now at this point, without having to have someone come in and cast the demon out of you. Like you don't let yourself get to that point, because no matter how far you fall, you're going to hit a wall that eventually like, I need Jesus to pull me out of this hole, and you reach up. I don't think people who never truly found God hit that wall. You know what I mean? Without some sort of third party coming into whatever.
Yeah.
Sorry. So you think that those kind of things, Christians can have oppression?
Yes.
And things like anxiety, fear, lust, pride are all probably different sorts of demonic manifestation oppression, right? We all are under agreement there.
And I will say with things like oppression, you need tools. Like the blood of Christ can obviously fix anything, but you do need tools to help like just walk certain things out. So
and I struggle so bad, like all my whole life, like not needing Jesus. I'm saying air quotes. I don't carry things with me. Like I shed to a fault.
Yeah.
I shed things off. I could have the worst blow up fight, like almost lose my marriage. And like 10 minutes later, I'm having lunch with Garrett and Kyle at, Mellow Mushroom, and be like, I messed up. I don't know what's going to happen next, but case Ross raw. Obviously I don't feel that, but like,
you carry some of that though. You don't realize it.
Oh, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I was joking them off pod. Like I think I may have like lymphoma or something now, because I got like swollen lymph node, and like they want to get some things looked at doubly now. It's like adding to it. Like I've been joking with myself, like, All American Rejects, I'll keep you my dirty little secret. Like what if it's all like the sin from my life I've carried in, like, your secrets keep you sick. Like, it's like, what if that's the case? Even though like, I've, found deliverance and stuff like that, it's just still like, what if that's it? It's just, I don't know. It's hard. So when it comes to like more serious, not serious things, like oppression, like people who aren't saved or people who do struggle, like schizophrenia is an obvious one. I think I have a hard time at pointing at that and being like, that's to me 100 years ago, that was always every time almost like some sort of demonic. And I'm not saying you institute these people. I know there is medicine and stuff that helps, and it's hard to draw that line, but let's use, you have schizophrenia, you do have bipolarism, you have manic depression, which is different than just depression, stuff like that. But like things like transgenderism specifically, homosexuality is that's been around a lot longer. I think there are some very good homosexual people. I think there are very rational homosexual people. I think there are homosexual people who love Jesus. That doesn't mean I think they're saved, but I think they can love Jesus all the same. You know what I mean? It's a different kind of thing. But like the transgender movement, you see a lot more violence. You see a lot more, and I'm fine to label that as a whole. Like I've studied this, like Zach would argue, like cite your sources, I'm sure. So, whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe correct me if I'm wrong. I know you probably won't, but there is a lot. Do you see a lot more of that kind of stuff with the transgender movement, specifically a lot more violence, a lot more abuse, a lot more stuff like that with that movement as a whole?
I mean, I guess with my For You page, you see some stuff on there where it's like,
y'all's For You pages.
Yeah, it's insane. But you do see some anger, but you see anger on
everything,
both sides of it. Yeah. And really going back to like the mental illness, because for me, what I would do is I would look at scripture and be like, God created male and female. And so if a male thinks he's a female, then he's confused in his purpose and identity from what God created him to be. Now, could that be a demonic oppression? Sure. Or could it just be that as he was born, that that sin in him manifested and came out through confusion of gender rather than addiction to methamphetamine, or, was he predisposition, or was there trauma or whatever that could be.
Yeah.
But I think with the mental illnesses, everything has a label now. Everyone has a badge. Everyone has this.
We've assigned a name to the
everything has a name, and so we fixate on the name rather than what is causing the symptoms and the root. And that's so for me. Leslie and I have talked about this, especially with some of the youth. We're like, man, is that a demon? And so we pray, but then I find myself being hesitant to say or to confront because of mental illness. And, we don't want to come and be like, hey, because of your mental illness, we think you have a demon, because, it's not always
you can confront
that way.
A demon without confronting a child, though.
Yeah. And I think there's ways you can test that without the kid ever really knowing too.
I find myself, and I think a lot of Christians may find themselves in the same boat, that it's hard to really come out against demonic oppression or possession amongst people within the American church, because we have a label and a name for everything. And sometimes you'll see pastors who focus more on imbalance rather than the possession. But then you see people who focus more on the possession rather than the imbalance. And so you have the people that are truly imbalanced and
you're saying imbalanced, like chemically in the brain.
Like chemically imbalanced. If someone could be born without a leg, then that means someone could be born with a dopamine deficiency. Totally.
So here's my question. Where do you, it's in the sub points here, kind of where I'm getting here. Where do you draw that line? I've pendulum swung too far on both ways. I've been
empathy. Empathy is the key.
Yes, but there's got to be somewhat of a level where you say, hey, that's wrong. That is and that's what I say. I've swung too far. I'm too accepting and tolerate too much with people without talking about Jesus or saying, hey, you're wrong.
Well, that's a difference, is we're not asking to tolerate.
Well, are we though?
In relationship with those that we're in relationship with, if a kid if one of your youth is dealing with suicide, like, you have empathy for that, but you're walking them through out of the pit of depression and suicidal tendencies. But it helps to have the foresight and the approach to at least see what they're dealing with. Yeah. I think that gives, I don't know.
So when I worked at Walgreens, CVS in the past, I was like, you work with a lot more now work with a bunch of straight white Christian males. So it's a totally different work field here. But in the past, and that's where my pendulum swung to, where I was too accepting and like kind of never let anything steer to Jesus. And then too far where I just like am like super closed off and like, hey, you're going to hell. Like you're wrong. Almost every time you try to actually get to the confront, like, hey, why do you believe this? Personal experience of people who live these kind of lives, they get defensive, they get angry, they get hostile, they feel accosted. Yeah. That to me is textbook, like demonic kind of stuff. Like you confront it, you approach it. Their response is, I'm not, we are done. I'm going to get hostile like that. And that was good, loving people. The moment you actually get to the root, whether you're touching, it's one or two things. You're touching a sore spot and there's trauma, which to me is probably at least half the time. Yeah. Or the other half of it is probably genuinely a demonic, at the very least heavy oppression, if not some level of possession. Is where I've kind of come to land. Does it affect my day-to-day life? No, but having kids now, one now, and then, oh, by the way, I have a boy on the way. I haven't announced that since the part. Yeah, I'm pregnant. Violet started talking about seeing things. You can't protect everything. Like, that boy wears a dress. Boy wears dresses. I'm like, no, polite. Like, no, boys don't wear dresses. Like, that's not normal. That's not okay. I'm that dad. It's not okay that boys wear dresses. I'm that guy.
We were watching Andor season 2 today. And the two women started kissing, and my stomach dropped to
in a kid Star Wars animated show.
Yeah, and I was like, skip. And Lorelai, she just came walking out, and I was like, at 4 years old, seeing two girls kiss.
they
would be
pick
a
up on that
seed.
stuff, and
Yeah.
they know, like and they didn't kiss, but in like Star Wars Young Jedi Adventures, Nash has 2 moms, and they're married to each other. And I was like, why does she have 2 moms? And like, she's too young to me to dive into it. It's just like they're friends. She calls the other one mom,
Right,
like
yeah.
you know. But like, she's getting to that point. Like, she sees a boy in a dress on a commercial, like, and like
Yeah.
a kid is just like, oh, you know,
This is a totally different topic, but why is it not as informative to just say some people will have 2 moms?
because I think I for me personally,
Because that's I mean that's your
I
reality.
don't want to ever. And this is where I get into the whole
Yeah.
transgenderism and stuff like that.
I didn't see that in the notes. I was confused.
And I think to get into mutilating, like talking about like, there's levels to it.
Sure.
You go to like
yeah.
taking off your breast and like changing your whole anatomy. That goes beyond confusion to me.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
think that goes into, you start getting into more really demonic kind of stuff. Like that's just, no, I'm confused. I'm going to go get my body mutilated. That to me comes across like that's like possession kind of stuff to me personally.
Okay. Yeah.
Or at least a heavy. It doesn't matter to my day-to-day life. I'm gonna say that again. Like, I don't know. I'm not a doctor.
Yeah.
I just have a hard time believing that that's just a normal. I'm never gonna accept that. You can call
Okay.
me a boomer, whatever. I biblically, spiritually just can't. I mean, what can I do about it? I can't. But I just can't
Right.
accept that that's a natural thing that God, like, that's just something wrong with their. God gave them that. Like, no, then that just means that God set them up to fail. To me, God didn't make their mind do that. To me, personally, am I wrong?
No, for me, my belief is that it comes back to we're all born into sin, and sin can be bigger in someone else than it is in me, you know. And
But there's a way out. God didn't create you to have a point. Like people who say I was born gay. That would imply that God birthed you into a sin you can't escape. And I don't see any biblical evidence that like, hey, like my brain's chemically imbalanced. God made me that way. So it was an accident that I'm a boy. So I was meant to be a girl. That is anti-biblical.
I know.
So to me, that's where does that thought come from? The enemy.
Okay.
How does it not? I'm asking,
how
does it
do
not?
you have this conversation though to where you have the same level of
Mhm.
intensity talking about
Yeah.
this that you do the actual spirit behind it?
So I have.
Okay.
And that's where I say I got to the point.
talk to that then.
Right. So there was I won't say a name. There was a girl I worked with and she was gay.
Mhm.
And we got to talking about it. I was like, so how did you come to this realization? You know how
Okay.
and she explained it to me. And then I was like, what you're saying when you started to get the attraction, but where did it actually come from? Like, when did you realize that? And then that's where it immediately got into like, well, so your business. I'm not going to talk about that. That's just how I was.
Just even there, I'm
Yeah.
straight, but I can see how those conversations
Mhm.
come at it from a point of not really understanding.
Yeah.
You know your
Yeah. But we
point
had a
of view.
relation, like we had like
Yeah.
a friendship. Like it was that point, like it wasn't just like, hey, we just talked about it one day. It was like
yeah.
months and months of talking about it and like
Totally,
the
I
relation.
understand.
Yeah. And then at the moment you got to that part of it, immediately hostile, which
Mhm.
one I said one of two things. Trauma, typically. I'll benefit of the doubt, probably.
Yeah.
Or I have come to where I'm at in my life. And this is where I really need Zach to just try to rebuke me here. I just don't believe that is just a mental illness. I think that is a truly demonic oppression at the very least, whispering to you.
Do you think we're assigning more
No,
to a certain thing?
I do not. I think it's the same for pornography. I think it's the same for pornography.
Okay.
I think it's the same for adultery. I think it's the same for.
You're talking
any
about this
sin.
in a way more intense way than any of the other things that we've said, though.
Well, that's because this is the top mental illness. I think transgenderism is a mental illness.
Okay.
Straight up and down. I just straight up and down think it's a mental illness. And I
yeah.
think at least half the time it's trauma and the other half the time it's demonic.
Okay.
That's me, Jonathan, my take, my view. I 10 toes deep believe that. You don't have to. That's just me. But I think it's the same for anything. You give into sin consistently and you make a lifestyle out of it. That is you giving into sin. That is not of God. So that would be a demonic led thing.
Totally.
So by that tracking, that also applies to homosexuality and transgenderism. You can't cut off a sin because it's a lifestyle sin. The church, Christians want to do. I'm very passionate about this because I think accepting.
You're passionate about the sin. I totally.
Yes,
I
very,
understand.
very much so because
It's
I think this has
hard
been
to
the best Trojan
Yes.
horse And nobody's going to listen to it and want to argue. I get it. There's two sides to this camp, and I genuinely do not think it'll ever be mended.
Yeah.
Point blank. We're too far gone in this. It's a battle that's lost for the Christian church, and it's not one we need to have. So what I can do for my family is do my best to like, hey, in love with her, because it is all love. Like, hey, boys just don't wear dresses. That's their thing. It's wrong. We believe that's wrong, but I'm not going to give her a scripture lesson on it at 3.5.
Yeah.
But I don't want her to go around thinking it's okay either at this age, because she started. It's just, I think you got to train them young in that regard. You can call me old fashioned.
I guess the only thing you said it to let her let her know that it's not okay. That mindset of it's not okay. How does she view this? A boy that does wear a dress, is she just gonna curl her nose up to that, or is she going to? Because a child could represent the love, and the innocence of the love of God in a way that 33-year-old Jonathan, who is jaded by the.
Well, see, that's the thing, though. I'm not, though. I say this, but like, I got to be very careful in this example.
I want to tell you, I think Zach has a very great. This is where I love to hear Zach talk about this, is because Zach's mentality is the mentality of Jesus here. And we've talked about it on our episode, is every time Jesus seen someone in sin, the scripture says that he was moved with a compassion, and that compassion was it means it was a turning of the bowels. It was like the love so deep for this person wanted Jesus. It made Jesus step out and perform miracles and speak to that demon, speak to that issue, speak to the spirit, but love the person. Like the woman caught in adultery, he spoke to the root issue of the Pharisees wanting to catch him up and point fingers, but loved the person and had her stand up, and I think we miss a lot of times Jesus's heart for this. And I will always fall back on this because I've had youth talk to me about this stuff. I've seen the hate on both sides. I used to be someone that was like, hey, if someone wants to be gay, let them be gay. And I'm still in that camp.
Because you can't change them.
Right. But it's the compassion. And Zach, he'll say it is that it's his responsibility to love like Jesus did, so that the person he could develop a relationship with the person, and then you can speak into that person and that sin.
So, yes. And me and Zach have argued about this before. We can't love like Jesus loved, first of all. We are incapable of this.
So only Jesus can love all things away. I think some other people have the ability to love certain areas in a way.
Like Mother Teresa, people like that, they just have an extra gift of that, extra portion of that. A lot of us, especially our generation, the way the world is now, we have a tendency to go in two ditches. You get to the point where you're just Wadesboro, Westboro Baptist, whatever. And you also have the people who are too accepting. There's got to be that middle ground, and I very rarely see that middle ground.
Again, I pushed hard on this simply because it felt like you were attacking this in the way, like...
Well, it's just because mental illness.
Transgender is the manifestation of all mental illnesses. Like it is...
No, that's just the one I'm talking about, because that's the one, like... Because schizophrenia, bipolarism, I think all of those things are too.
Yeah.
Those are just medicated things that you can put medicine behind and at least control. Do I still think that those are at least some percentage of the time demonic? Yes. I just think that the transgender movement, the LGBTQ thing as a whole, is one of the major manifestations of, to me, the things that we accepted in the United States nationally. I don't think you should go Middle East and kill them either. Goodness gracious, that's too far. Let them live their lives. Let them live their lives. But 9 times out of 10, we're not going to interact with them or affect our lives. I just for the purposes of this conversation, that's just where I stand on it. But the point I was going to make a minute ago, how Violet would respond to stuff like that if she saw like a boy with a dress on. There's been 2 or 3 examples in my life as an adult having this mindset that I have about this stuff, where a gay man in female attire has been in a situation where I've needed to chop it up with them.
Yeah.
And I gladly...
An adult to a child, totally different. I thought we were talking about just like...
yes.
Like if she goes to school.
But I was talking about like me, you were saying how I feel specifically.
Yeah. No, I understand that.
As an adult to an adult.
Yeah.
if a dude comes up to me, and there's been situations where I've had to, in like a church Christian setting, talk to these people, I treat them like I would treat you. I don't talk to them any different. I don't treat them any different.
Yeah, but how you talk about this now though?
I tell people how I feel about it straight up. And those kind of people,
And
if they
again,
ask me,
that affects how the conversation goes and
See,
why you meet the resistance.
well, that's the thing. Most people don't have a resistance. There are people in my life who have lived this lifestyle, knew I felt this way, and we got along great. And the only time we didn't is and it was never me. They bring it up like, why do you believe that way? And I can calmly, and I'm more passionate. Here's we're friends. We're all just friends. I can get, but like if
this
someone
is an open window to.
Well, and I'll gladly defend it. But the thing is, the friends, the people that I actually have in my life that are that way, we're still friends. Like they don't care. They're not going to change unless Jesus gets a hold of them, and I'm not going to change my. I'm actually doubling down on it more now than I ever have.
Yeah,
I just genuinely think that it's one of the worst things that's happening to our nation right now, amongst other things.
Yeah,
I think it's a dangerous thing. I think pedophilia is the next go round. And this isn't like a Trump. I'm not a Trump guy. This isn't a political statement. Like
it's on the list.
Probably truly is. And I'm in my dad's camp. If he is, I hope he gets thrown under the schoolyard too. You know what I mean? I hope everybody gets exposed who needs to get exposed. But talking about this, it's a sin is a sin is a sin. And I think they're all demonically influenced, obviously to an aspect. But talking about mental illness, I think that there's a lot of undiagnosed demonic.
There comes a point where whenever we come to the practical sense of it all, because we want to therapy speech our way out of this. There comes a point where we have to come off the teat in this sense, and we have to spiritually address some of the issues that happen in our life. That's why, like I said earlier, like I started to just, I think literally manifest the stress in my life. Like I was feeling it, and I still do to a degree, but I know what it's related to. I feel like I know what it's related to, and I can prayerfully address those things while also practically walk out the things that I know I need to do.
Yep.
So
shaping our we're talking about shaping our daily life, our views on all this stuff. I know we didn't really talk about mental illness. I knew that was going to be the toughest one to talk about because nobody outside of me is really going to want to put 10 toes down on talking about your ministry. It's tough to put 10 toes down on this kind of stuff when you're working with people day in, day out. You don't want your words to get misconstrued. I totally get that.
It just wasn't in the notes. I was just like, all right, we're going to dive into this. Let's dive into it.
Yeah. I know those are hot.
I was just listening.
Yeah.
I used to put you guys on the spot and but I'm not going to do that.
That's fine. I mean, I definitely think that you see the parades where it's dudes walking around in like masks and just the disgusting outfits where there's kids and they're like, I believe that part is like a demonic oppression and influence. But then I also have met some gay people who
hate that stuff.
Yeah. They're like, I hate that. So it's like, well, I'm just going to love people. What I've come down. So anyways, next we'll go on to the next one.
We'll talk about living. This world's going to circle back to I know it sounds super confrontational. It's not. I'm very passionate about it. I don't know how else to talk about it amongst friends this way, but like when I pray about this kind of stuff, because I'm not going to change this. You're not going to change this. Billy Graham, there's no pastor who's going to change this. It's just the way that our lives live. It's the way our world is. I pray for our nation. I pray that these people, it makes me sad, not angry. I'm not angry about it. Nothing to be angry about. I'm sad for these people. I'm sad that they feel like this is the way that they have to live. I'm sad that people who are stuck in mental illness, who, they feel like that they have no way out because they won't go talk to a therapist. They won't go seek help. They just won't. Or if I don't know. It makes me sad. And I just pray for those people who are hurting and lost that they just find their way.
Yeah. Did you know Murray State got no hit today?
Yeah.
To lose? Beautiful.
Wow.
It
was a great flawless game from Arkansas. I hate that it's Arkansas, but
19 strikeouts. Absolutely wild.
Sorry, they just popped up. So.
It was crazy. So my day in and day out when it comes to the demonic, I don't. I start my day in prayer and Thanksgiving. I read my Bible at work for the first hour. I read a book supplement. The moment I stop doing that for multiple days, that's when I start to feel myself drifting into temptation. I start to feel like the demonic devil on your shoulder whispering in your ear.
Yeah.
So I think the biggest key is for me staying rooted in the Word, staying rooted in prayer, having meaningful conversations with people about God, about Scripture. I think those are the things that kind of, apple a day keeps the doctor away. Scripture a day keeps the devil away, for, layman's terms.
Hashtag God's plan.
Hashtag God's plan. But I do think, if you want to round out the demonic, this conversation for me in a nutshell, I think that there's once again, like everything, there's two pitfalls on each side. I think living in the middle, you need to live in a healthy understanding. There is light, there is dark, and you can fall into either side. Both sides exist. You shouldn't be scared of one. You shouldn't seek out the dark, but you do need to live in
It does not exist to just one party, one political party.
Yeah. It's, there is a war, and it's for your soul. It's for your brother's soul. There's a war raging for your soul. And you seem to be aware of that. How you do that, it shouldn't be fear-based. And I don't think, people hear demons, most people scares them, but here in this nation, fear, demon, it's just, we're so distracted. When I said Nick Ripken earlier about a quote you were going to say, in the end of The Insanity of God, he has to write under a surname. So his name's not really Nick Ripken, but if you haven't read The Insanity of God, it's amazing. The Obedience of God's not very good, but this first book, The Insanity of God's great. He has a quote at the end, says, why would he was talking about different ways that the devil works over in other nations and stuff. Said, why would the devil do that in the United States? Because that would wake up the sleeping giant. He's not going to do that. That's why we're so distracted. We live in our phones. We worship the phone. We worship technology. That's the demon of today. That's the devil of today, is technology, is distraction, is in our phones. That's what leads to anxiety. That's what leads to, I think if you dumb down everybody's phones again.
I've thought about it lately.
Me too. If you went back to the old flip phones, I guarantee you mental health would rise. Half the problems we deal with today will go. Genuinely, I truly believe they will go away. But that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I went to a coffee shop I go to, Piper's, recently. And dude, behind the register, God love him, he had that thick Bible wide open with his flip phone. Dude in front of me made note of the Bible. He's like, what are you doing? It's like, I'm doing speed memory or whatever.
I genuinely, me and Tantra today, dumbing our phones down. I genuinely think about all the time, productivity, plus temptation. I mean, good. I would promise you, I probably have 90% less temptations, but didn't have a phone that was constantly flashing stuff in front of my eyes. I don't know. This is a lot more of a thoughtful episode than I thought it was going to be.
It was good. But, for me, and I'll be brief, I think with the spirit realm and the heavenly realm, as Scripture calls it, like, it's good to know your enemy, and knowing my enemy has actually given me much peace over my enemy. And knowing that there is a realm with physical, spiritual beings that will try to kill, steal, and destroy, knowing their purpose and their plan, it's always easier to thwart them. And for our home and for myself, I'm the same way. I have to read, and I have to read the word so I can know God, and not just know God, but seek God in his word, and making sure that I'm staying plugged into my church and people who I can have these conversations with who think like-minded this way. Because if I believe this is real, then I need to be around the people who also believe this is real. And just not having that fear. I'm not afraid of a demon anymore. There's times where I'm sleeping in my room and I'm like, something feels off. And I just pray, and just speak the name of Jesus, and those things flee. And so it can be a topic where Christians are very nervous, very scared. But in reality, if you can just hold on to Colossians 2:15, and I love it, because Satan has literally been made fun of in public by the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He was disarmed. He lost it all. And so the only thing that he has now is his ability to deceive. And it's funny because you look at pride and deception. The very first prideful deception didn't happen with Eve, but it happened with Satan. And his very sin and his deception was his own downfall, even though he thought he was walking high. So it's funny now knowing who he is and how he's been defeated and everything. So, that's how we live our lives. We don't freak out, but we just follow Christ.
What's your final takeaway?
I mean, Garrett said most of it. I mean, you give power to these things. And as long as you have claimed the name of Christ, he rules in your life, in your heart, in your mind. There's no place for those things. It's just a constant reminder. So
I think as a good PSA, because whether it be, we've talked a lot about the demonic, we've talked a lot about, heavier subjects and like scary things for people who probably aren't in some certain things. I think it's important to say, we've said it before, if you talk about suicide, if you are struggling with fear, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, chronic lust, transgenders, whatever it may be, something that you're struggling with, go talk to somebody. Doesn't have to be a Christian, doesn't have to be a pastor, doesn't have to be, it should be better if it was, or a Christian counselor at the very least. At the very least.
Yeah.
And I will encourage you that if you are listening and you're being oppressed and everything, it comes to a point where it goes from your head knowledge to your gnosko knowledge, which is your experiential knowledge of the word knowing. It's Greek for know. And so when Jesus says that you will know the one true God, that means you will experience reality of the one true God. And so when Christ becomes a reality and not just your mentality, you will have, that's when you get your God-given authority. That's when you got your voice. And so you can speak to the enemy.
Yep. So that's where we kind of steer you. We're not professionals here.
Should have started with that.
Well, they know this by now. Still.
You should have came dressed a full draw butler, like priest outfit.
Oh, I thought you were going to say from 300.
No, from every single Catholic priest exorcism movie he's doing now.
You mean Russell Crowe?
Oh yeah, Russell Crowe, bro.
It's late,
bro. I'm going on 20 hours of sleep. Or
20 hours of sleep.
And we got a staff meeting in the morning.
Yeah,
I got to work in the morning. I got Disney coming up. Hey, you know what? I'm living what I preach. It's Pride Month at Disney. I'm going down there. I'm going into the fire.
You should wear your Listen to Women Preach shirt.
That wouldn't matter down there. I want to tell one funny story, and then we'll close. This is unrelated. We went to Pride Month because June's Pride Month, and Disney they do less and less now, but it used to be a huge deal at Disney. I remember the last time we went in June. Well, not the last time, but I was in high school or early college. Can't remember which trip it was. Maybe in the trip I proposed to Abby on. I'm not sure. Anyway, some point I was old enough to remember my dad. It was like a unified, like, I guess gay people communicate on like Disney, like, hey, Reddit, whatever. Hey, everybody who's going to Magic Kingdom today wears red to showcase your pride, whatever. It happened to be red that day. My dad was in a red polo and he was getting something in line, and this guy I come to him like, oh, hey, I love your shirt. My dad was like, oh, thanks. Dad's plot. Then he went to go check out. I was like, oh, I love your red shirt. And then I kind of like dawned on my dad. He was like, oh, looking around like everybody's in red. And then like his instinctual reaction was like, oh, thank you. Just deepened his voice.
My name's Lynn.
Little did they know, they were like, oh, I like that more.
Oh no.
Dougie, didn't it? But so we'll be back with you after Disney with another episode. Not sure what it will be yet, but we'll be back with you. Zach will probably be back with you. I have a few people who are wanting a guest host really bad.
We ain't got the spots.
I know we'll have to have a sit out bench.
Yep.
One of them wanted to tonight, and you think I'm bad on my we would have gone that transgenderism thing. Y'all might have had to put gloves on. He's anyway, but we'll be back with you again sooner rather than later. Love you guys. I'll mostly film close out.